What have we got today? Oh, grape and mint. Nice. Right. Got it there. Okay, so a lot has happened in the last week or so since the last live stream. A lot has happened. The Olympics is now concluded. The medal table was interesting because the IOC ranks medals differently to the US. So the IOC would rank Great Britain as 7th, but the American rankings rank Great Britain as 3rd. So the GB athletes had a very, very good Olympics, one more medal than Tokyo, but less golds. So that's an interesting one when it comes to sports funding. The Olympics, there was some controversy. There always is, always is at the Olympics. The triathletes, obviously, there was a lot of concerns about the water quality of the River Seine, and that was proven correct with a lot of athletes coming down quite unwell. We've also had the return of European club football. Yes, the brief summer break that we had has now concluded, and the daily grind of football clubs battling out in various leagues across Europe has returned. Obviously, it's with the first season with the new Champions League format, so we'll see how that plays out with the new format and how fans respond to that. A lot of fans aren't overly happy with the new Champions League format, so we'll have to see how that plays out. We've already had our first managerial casualty in English football. Ryan Lowe has departed Preston North End by mutual consent. There's a lot going on. Liverpool, their lack of signings of players is quite notable and noteworthy. The lack of signings that Arne Slot has made as the new manager is very, very interesting, and there's the potential for a lot of players to be leaving Liverpool. Manchester City, some news coming out about Manchester City. Yes, they have been fined for delaying start times of games, but the investigation is now gathering pace. And we'll find out before the end of the autumn here in the Northern Hemisphere what's going to happen with Man City and those 115 charges. I think it's starting to go in the direction of probably more punishment rather than getting off with it. I think with what's coming out, being leaked out to the press, is that this is going to be a collision course between Manchester City and the Premier League. Obviously, we know UEFA originally found them guilty. They got off on a technicality through the Court of Arbitration for Sport on a time limitations side of things, where UEFA didn't act quickly enough to punish them. The Premier League, that time limitation rule doesn't exist. So there's a lot of pressure on the Premier League and the FA here and the football authorities here in England to take action. And there does seem to be like a two-tier system in a sense. I wouldn't be surprised if more clubs fall foul of points deductions and investigations over football club spending. I wouldn't be surprised if that continues to be a theme going forward with the new spending rules that UEFA wants domestic leagues to bring into play in regards to club expenditure, revenues, and pre and post-tax profits. There's a mouthful. Obviously, we now know the cause of the sad cause of Graham Thorpe's untimely and early passing. It was suicide, and I need to do a video again on athlete welfare. They don't tend to get a lot of views, which is I find that ridiculous that athlete welfare videos and mental health videos don't get the views I think they should on this channel and in general in the discussion. But it is known that his illness when he was appointed to take over the Afghan test side was mental health related. We do know that throughout his career he was suffering with severe forms of depression, and it is obviously tragic that he did decide to end his own life, and it does create that debate around not only mental health with athletes and those under a lot of pressure, but especially with men. And we've discussed it before at length on the channel, the mental health aspect of things and how it's the biggest killer of young and middle-aged men in the world. Especially in this country, it is the biggest killer of young men. So it's an issue that I'm quite passionate about and have a lot of experience of. And it's something that I think we need to discuss. Talking about player welfare, Latrell Mitchell has been making headlines in the NRL with that photograph that has been circulating for the last 6 days. The NRL Integrity Unit has hit him with a breach notice, and the South Sydney Rabbitohs have stood him down for the rest of the season. Now, obviously, he was out injured anyway. Souths aren't going to make the finals. We know that. They're too far back, and their defensive record is shocking. They've had a terrible season. Jason Demetrio got sacked earlier in the year. Wayne Bennett's coming in next year as his full-time replacement. There's a lot of question marks over the culture of the club and various other factors as well. And Latrell Mitchell, I would say the circumstances with Latrell Mitchell is very, very similar to Cameron Munster and Brandon Smith a couple of years ago for the Melbourne Storm. We've had Trindle at the Cronulla Sharks failing a drink drive, pulled over, had drugs in his system as well. So this is not an isolated incident, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens in regards to the NRL and what punishment they do eventually decide to give Latrell Mitchell. Because bear this in mind, he hasn't been caught by the drugs testers. He's obviously been caught on camera away from club activities at a coaching clinic down in New South Wales in a place called Dubbo. He's been caught on camera, someone else in the room. So the circumstances surrounding that. It's not a good look, considering he's one of the poster boys of the sport, and with how they're trying to promote the Vegas games and grow the game overseas and continue to grow within Australia and New Zealand. Its timing is not good. It's not good, and it's very interesting that, as I say, it's not an isolated incident. Since the channels existed, multiple rugby league players and, in fact, sportsmen in general and women have failed either with drugs tests with recreational drugs in their system, or they've been caught using them away from sport. Oh God, that's going to explode. So yeah, it's an ongoing thing. We'll see what the NRL decides what his punishment's going to be. We know South Sydney have stood him down. He won't play again this season. Oh, that's good. Oh, that's really good. Sorry. Blackcurrant and I think it's blackcurrant and mint I'm drinking. No, it's just blackcurrant. Oh, it's red grape juice. So basically, sugary wine. Yeah, I've decided to stop drinking Lipton's iced tea as much, and I'm now going for this European drink, which is from, where's it from? I think it's from Romania. Yeah, it's from Romania. Red grape juice, sugar, sweeteners. Well, so it's basically wine. It's quite nice. It's got, obviously, it's had that. Honestly, you would normally see me doing these live streams drinking like Monster or Red Bull, well, not Red Bull, but Monster, Lucozade, and some other energy drinks. But I've decided to start drinking more of these fruit juices. Really nice, really good for you. Oh, that is actually that's really good. Don't knock it till you try it. They do multiple flavors. They do like a pineapple flavor, passion fruit, orange, mint, and strawberry. It's a weird mix, that one, but that red grape juice, really good. You can imagine some Eastern European just dropping a bit of vodka in there and making some homemade wine, but some good stuff. So yes, European football season has returned. It's very short off season. This I've noticed. It seems to me, I mean, it is the middle of August, but it does feel as if the league off season is getting shorter every year. It's one of them. Other news: Twickenham, the sponsorship deal with Twickenham, and fans not being happy with the RFU with how the sponsorship deal and the renaming of Twickenham and the naming rights for the stadium. It's the price you have to pay for globalised sport. It's the price you have to pay for globalised sport. I mean, Parramatta Stadium has changed name twice. It was Bankwest and now it's CommBank. So major stadiums have the naming rights, and we can debate the pros and cons of naming rights for stadiums with the traditional name of the stadium. So we'll go with my team, Blackburn Rovers. We play at Ewood Park. We haven't actually got naming rights for the stadium, but if it was changed to, like, I don't know, we're sponsored by Totally Wicked, so if it was to have a sponsorship change, would fans agree with that? Wigan, it was always known as the JJB, formerly then known as the DW. a lot of fans don't particularly like this commercialization of sport, and a lot of fan groups across Europe have voiced their anger at basically what is seen as a cash grab by leagues and teams. It's an ongoing thing. I mean, it's just an ongoing thing. Yeah, I mean, what else can you say about that? Now, obviously, the Euros obviously dominated a good portion of this summer, and I did my review video, and I felt that as the tournament wore on, I think the quality wore off. I think wasn't as exciting as the tournament 2021, the delayed tournament, or the 2016 tournament. And again, talking about that shortened off season, it does appear that players look tired. Players just look very, very tired at the end of a long, grueling club season. As I said, this is the start of the new Champions League format, and which actually we can debate the pros and cons of that new format and the direction that club football is taking and the direction the sport is taking in general. We've had the same debate in other sports as well, and the direction certain sports are taking, and how fixture lists are figured out, and fixture congestion, and are too many games being played? Do we have to load manage players? I will say this: the amount of sport I've watched over the years, a player wants to play every game if he can. They want to play every game, even through injury, and that's that player welfare argument. Is balancing out minutes and resting players, rotating players, and making sure the talent is fully fit. Because we want to see the best players play. We want to see the top talent play. But my favourite sports, load management has been discussed. We've had discussions about load management in the NBA, the NHL, the AFL, the NRL. We're having discussions in rugby union across the various leagues and international teams about capping the amount of games per year a player plays. And again, that load management. And these are take the NBA out of it, but these are very, very physical contact team sports where the risk of injury is quite high. It's very, very rare that a player plays every single game. Or every single minute of every single game. Those Ironman streaks, for example, we have seen some players in some of these very physical team sports complete really ridiculous Ironman streaks, and that's a credit to their fitness and dedication and their technique and their skill and their discipline. Because suspensions, obviously, players will get suspended at various points, players will get injured at various points, and we've seen some really lengthy Ironman streaks in various leagues around the world and in various team sports around the world, where players play a lot of minutes, a lot of games, and a lot of consecutive games without missing any, not getting any suspensions or injuries, and that is, in my opinion, a reflection of that player's determination, his character, his skill level, his fitness, and his contribution to a team. We've seen that. But load management starting to enter the discussion. A lot of players are saying, we don't necessarily want this. We want to play as many games as we can to maximise our careers, because there are, obviously appearance bonuses and other financial incentives attached. And of course, records are there to be broken. And it is a discussion going on alongside the player welfare and mental health discussion. You can get players with burnout, and injuries can affect players as well. And of course, with Graham Thorpe's untimely passing, that brings that into perspective as a discussion point. And he was a great player, and he was a very, very good coach as well. Very well respected within the game, had a lot of time for others, helped support others when they were going through tough times. And obviously his passing, and then the statement from his family, and then the news isn't really covering it anymore. They're not really getting into the discussion behind it and the causes behind it and lessons that can be learned from it, because it's not an isolated incident with Graham Thorpe. And so that's also worthy of discussion. I think it's very worthy of discussion. I need to have another haircut, I think. So there's that to factor in as well. Also, on a more outside YouTube kind of thing, Work's been particularly hectic where I work. It's been very, very hectic. A lot of changes, a lot of stress, which has slightly impacted the upload schedule a little bit, which is frustrating. I would have liked to have got more content done, done some more club history videos, for example. I would have liked to have done some more player profiles, for example, and some just more general sports history videos. That hasn't obviously come to pass, which is a bit frustrating. But at the end of the day, obviously, do have a day job to focus on, and it is a grueling day job, and there's a lot of structural changes going on at my work. So there's that to bear in mind, and it's going to be a very hectic month or so coming up. Although I do have a week off in September, so I aim to get a bit more content done in the week off I have in September, and we'll see. I've got some video ideas rattling around. Got some more NRL content that I want to do in regards to just the wooden spoon seasons and player profiles, because there will be more players retiring at the end of the year and hanging up the boots, and it'd be interesting to look at some more player careers there. So there's a lot to look forward to. Obviously, the transfer window is still open for another couple of weeks in European football. So there's still chances for more players to get signed, more movement of players. We do know that Barcelona, for example, can't register 5 contracts at the moment. So every season, this seems to be a thing with Barcelona, that they can't register player contracts. Why haven't they been punished yet? It's very complex. 115 charges, that's a lot to go through. They've been punished, obviously, for a separate spate of rule breaches in regards to kickoff times and delaying start times and dragging their heels over, getting players back out on the field to resume play. They were only hit with a pitiful fine, quite honestly. But it's 115 charges, although the hearing date has been moved forward, which is very, very interesting. So it will be interesting to see what comes out of it, but it's looking more and more likely there is a punishment coming their way with some of the rhetoric that's coming out. If the Premier League give out a weak punishment, or what's deemed to be a weak punishment, considering the punishments handed out Nottingham Forest and Everton last season, for example, which could in theory have had an impact on the league season. They obviously didn't, because Luton didn't stay up, or Sheffield United stay up, but there could be. They need to get this right, basically, is what I'm getting at. I can see more clubs down the line having points deductions and fines to start, throughout this season. We know there's a couple of clubs that the Premier League are looking at. And we've seen, clubs selling players for overinflated values to get round the current rules that have been brought in, the new rules that have been brought in. So we'll see what happens. We'll see. We'll see what happens with Ipswich. They could surprise a lot of us. As I say, it's only the first week of the Premier League season, and a lot can happen. We'll see what happens. They've got a very good team unity and good culture there, and that can take you a long way when you have lesser quality, I suppose. They do have a really good, good culture at Ipswich, and a very, very good direction they're heading in. So we'll see what happens. People said Luton would finish last. They didn't. They actually showed more fight than the team Sheffield United and Burnley, who were dreadful. And they showed a lot more fight than they did to other clubs that were relegated. And Everton, for example, keep defying that relegation drop with all their off-field issues. Nottingham Forest basically completely changed their squad from promotion till now. They've gone through basically 2 full squads worth of players. I think there are going to be more clubs with points deductions, like Southampton and for example, decided to keep a lot of their squad together. Ipswich added a little bit. They kept a lot of their squad together. Leicester kept the majority of their squad together. So the 3 promoted clubs aren't massively different from last season or when Southampton and Leicester were relegated. They're not massively different in squad turnover. So they haven't actually spent stupid amounts of money. Leicester, however, are technically under investigation for potentially breaching Premier League sustainability rules. Now, this is where I can see if Man City get what is deemed to be an insufficient punishment or a weak punishment, I can definitely see a lot of problems down the line. But UEFA and now the various domestic leagues are now opened up this can of worms, but they allow this can of worms to be open for the last 30 years. They keep changing the financial rules, and football has lost its way. There's too much money in the sport, not evenly distributed, and certain clubs, whatever the rule changes, will always have a certain advantage, be it fairly or unfairly, and it is impacting the quality we see on the field. Some teams are deliberately having to weaken themselves in order to stay financially compliant, which, but a lot of other teams are well run, but can't be successful because they're well run. So there definitely needs to be a massive rethink and a massive review of spending rules, finances, and the transfer market, how player agents operate, how player contracts are structured, how signing bonuses can work around any potential salary caps that are brought in or spending caps that are brought in. We need to look at TV deals and how they're structured to make sure they're fair. Look at France. France is in a mess, and we've already seen a big French club go out of business because it's owed money by another club. So Barcelona come into this conversation because they still owe money for the Malcolm transfer, which has ultimately led to Bordeaux ceasing to exist basically in its current form. It's going to have to reform as an amateur club and then try and get back into the professional ranks in French football. So it's been a very interesting off-season. At the same time, I haven't overly worried about the off-season, really. I'm becoming less interested in professional football. I enjoy it a lot less. I think the constant rule changes with VAR and the interpretation of offside and handball and that aspect of things has caused problems. The off-field issues, I think, is something else that is an ongoing thing that fans aren't happy about. Cost of going to games, cost of merchandise, direction the sport's heading in. Oh, this is really nice. I'm sorry. I'm actually really liking this one. I've had these original Fruity Fresh before, but I've not had this flavour before, and it's actually really, really nice. I can't get the lid back. I'm getting used to these new caps which don't come off and stay on, but they are frustrating. They're fiddly. But no, in regards to the Man City situation, other clubs are going to face these charges at some point. Other clubs are going to eventually. The Man City thing reminds me of some other leagues and sports around the world where there are strict spending rules, strict salary caps, forcing of transparency within rules, and it was inevitable. It was going to happen, and I say that because for the last 30 odd years, the way the sport has gone in regards to TV rights, spending money, transfer fees, player salaries, agents' fees, it was inevitable that there was too much money in the system held within a few clubs, basically. It's had a knock-on negative impact for the majority of league structures and clubs around Europe. It has. I think the quality of football we're seeing now is less quality than what we were seeing 20 years ago, in my opinion. I honestly believe that. Yeah, but we are the sport's at a crossroads. I've been saying it now for some time, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. Going forward. But as I say, the situation, with Man City, for example, The hearing date, as I say, has been moved forward. It, I think, opens next month and should be concluded by the end of October. So we'll find out pretty soon what's happening with Man City, and it could have momentous implications for football, and not just here in England, but across Europe. Oh, what, the gulf between the Championship and Premier League is too big. It's the first weekend of the season, ladies and gentlemen. I don't worry too much about the first weekend. It's the first month. When you get to the first international break, is a good time to then assess where clubs are at. The transfer window is still open for another couple of weeks, and of course, we've only had a very, very short off season. Literally a very short off season, barely a month and a half. And so I do feel that the summer break and the off season is too short, and players are, in my opinion, looking exceptionally tired. And this is, I mean, I watch, as I say, a lot of different sports, and the discussion around load management and the discussion around player welfare and discussion around, controlling of league spending, salary caps, spending caps, trying to not, I wouldn't say restrict, but balance out the talent. Finance is always a big thing. Now, let's. Oh God, right. Let me have a quick look at all the results. I haven't actually seen all the results today, so I can't comment on what I haven't seen. But Man United won last night 1-0. Scottish League Cup, St Johnstone, Premier League. Right, let's have a look at the results today so far. I don't want to select club. I just want to look at the frigging results, scores and fixtures. I don't like this, the new structure of the BBC website. Right, so Liverpool beat Ipswich 2-0. That's not a terrible result. Arsenal beat Wolves 2-0. Brighton, Everton 3-0. I think that's the result for me that stands out. Everton, yeah, they needed a good start to the season. Newcastle beat Southampton 1-0. Forest, Bournemouth 1-1 draws. And Villa beat West Ham 2-1. Right, let's have a look. Let's get out of that. Let's just go back to. No, we just want football. We just want football. We don't want Premier League. Right. Let's have a look at the results and the tables and the results. And I just tables, scores and fixtures. Here we go. So the Championship, Derby beat Borough 1-0. Portsmouth Luton was a 0-0. West Brom Leeds was a 0-0. Bristol beat Millwall 4-3. That looks like a good game. Burnley Cardiff 5-0. But then that's more of an indictment against Cardiff, potentially, rather than anyone else. Norwich Blackburn 2-2. We've had a good start to the season. Happy with that. Win 1, draw 1. We also won quite well in the League Cup in midweek. And we've sold Sammy Smodic, so make of that what you will. Plymouth 1, Hull 1. So finally Wayne Rooney's team get a point. So there you go. Sheffield United 2-2 QPR. Swansea beat Preston 3-0. Watford beat Stoke 3-0. In League One, Charlton beat Leyton Orient in a London derby 1-0. Oh dear, Shrewsbury 1, Peterborough 4. That's a bad defeat for the Shrews. Stockport respond to their defeat in the League Cup to my mob 6-1 by beating Blackpool 3-0. Crawley beat Cambridge 1-0. Huddersfield beat Stevenage 2-1. Barnsley beat Lincoln 2-1. Mansfield Burton 3-all. So there's some exciting results here. Northampton 2-1 over Exeter. That could be a rugby union matchup, that one. Northampton Saints, Exeter Chiefs. Not that one out. Reading win. So Reading weren't even sure to even start the season. They beat Wigan 2-0. Both ex-Premier League clubs. Both have had financial issues off the field. Rotherham 0, Bristol Rovers 0. Wickham losing to Birmingham 3-2. So Birmingham, good start in League One. League Two, Bromley winning in the Football League for the first time against Wimbledon 2-0. good result. Carlisle are beating Barrow 1-0, so that's the Cumbrian derby. Accrington 3, Harrogate 3. That looks like a good game. Bradford, Salford's 0-0. Colchester beating MK Dons 2-0. Thank you very much. Everyone hates MK Dons. Chesterfield putting 5 past Crewe. That's a bit of a one-sided result there. Grimsby beating Cheltenham 3-2. Gillingham 1-0 over Morecambe. Newport beat Doncaster 3-1. Port Vale Tranmere's a 0-0. Swindon, one of my local clubs, have lost 4-0 to Walsall. Scottish Championship, Ayr United have won 3-2 at Hamilton. Scottish League One, Alaba 1-0. Goals. The National League, yes, is going to be interesting. Forest Green Rovers 4-0 over Boston United. Yeovil 1-0 over Braintree. One of my local teams, Aldershot, 1-1-0. One of my other local teams, Maynard United, lost 2-1 to Solihull. Sutton United put 5 past Altrincham, so that's a good response to falling out of the Football League, having a good solid win. Gateshead, who should have been promoted, in my opinion, I think the Football League have made a blunder with that. With that whole situation, they've won 2-0. They're not going to give up trying to get promotion to the Football League. I think they've been unfairly treated. York winning against Tamworth 2-0. So there's some interesting results coming in. Kidderminster Harriers. I love the Kidderminster Harriers. They won 3-0. Some good results coming in. One of my local teams, Farmer, have beaten Torquay 1-0. And they've got the Scottish League Cup. Aberdeen beating Queen's Park 1-0. Dundee putting 6 past Airdrieonians in a 6-1 win. Falkirk have won 2-0 over Hearts. Spartans beating Ross County 1-0. And Rangers are currently 1-0 up against St Johnstone, so we'll see what happens there. English FA Cup, there's some preliminary rounds going on at the moment. Yeah. Oh God, there's a lot of games being played in the preliminary rounds of the FA Cup. Oh, Camberley, they lost 3-1 to Corinthian. Oh yeah, that's one of my local clubs. There's a lot of preliminary FA Cup. One of my local clubs, Binfield, have won 9-1 in their FA Cup preliminary round. Oh, of course. Oh, and Rushden and Diamonds, they have reformed. They lost 2-0 to Newark. So there you go. Rushden and Diamonds back from the dead. I was a bit surprised to see them pop up. I'm trying to find some of my local clubs. Didcott's another reasonably local club to me. They've won 2-0 away. Oh, wow. There's a lot of... Virginia Water, another local club, beating another local club, Ascot United, in a local derby, 2-1. I know some lads used to play for Ascot United, actually. Oh, wow. That is a lot of preliminary round games there in the non-league for the FA Cup. But yeah, Rushden and Diamonds back from the dead. Rangers out of the Champions League is not good really for Scottish football, in my opinion. But it sums up where Scotland is in regards to European clubs, where the Scottish League is, and where the standard of play is, and it's been that way for a long time. I mean, yes, Kilmarnock getting through into the Conference League is good. So there are some green shoots there, I suppose, but yeah, it's been tough going for Scottish clubs in Europe for some time now. I mean, admittedly, Rangers are the only club in recent memory to make 2 European finals in my lifetime. But yeah, it is troubling where Scottish football actually has declined to. And if you look at my football club history videos, you can see that unfortunately I haven't got to Rangers and Celtic properly, but yeah. Oh, the Swiss Champions League system, how they've done the format. It works for basketball, and it can work for like ice hockey in a sense. It doesn't work with a sport that has a 1 week turnaround or a turnaround like football does. It doesn't work with the turnaround required. It normally works for short format team sports like basketball and ice hockey, where you can play, or baseball, where you can play multiple games within a week. It doesn't work for a sport where the maximum you can play of games in a week. You need at least a 3-4 day turnaround. It doesn't work. Doesn't. I understand why UEFA are obviously wanting to alter formats, again, TV deals and media deals and all that. But on a sporting standpoint, when you've got to take various teams out of their domestic competitions and put them in a European competition, like a transcontinental competition, it doesn't work. That system works for kids' sports days, collegiate sports, and team sports that have a very short turnaround span. So, like the NBA, for example, or basketball, ice hockey, baseball. Technically, short formats of cricket like T20. Yes, that format could work. It does work with basketball. It does work. Let's say university sports, right? It can work with certain sports. Yes, it does. It cannot work with sports like rugby union or rugby league or football. It just cannot work, and it cannot work with. I understand they've looked at it and they said, "Oh, it works for a team sport. It works," but then they haven't factored in that these clubs that are playing in the Champions League, Europa League, and Europa Conference League, they have domestic league competitions they've got to play. They've got domestic cup competitions they've got to play in, and it will. And we've already got rules in place limiting squad sizes. When I was a kid growing up, you had a full reserve league going. Squad sizes were different. I've got this annoying tuft of hair up here. Really annoying me. I'm going to have to cut my hair soon. But would it be a better idea to increase the group stage? I think that would have been considered. But already the group stage format had a lot of flaws to it, and wasn't overly popular. In a sense, because it was a flawed system. There's no perfect system. A lot of people think go back to straight knockouts, because then you get more upsets and you get more, David and Goliath stories and magical runs, and you get a little bit of basically less is more, but you make less money that way. Unless you start charging ridiculous amounts for TV deals and tickets and merchandise, and you have to then mark up things. A lot of people will want to go back to the more traditional straight knockouts like you get with domestic cup competitions, yes, like we used to have in the 90s and beyond and before, the traditional format. But UEFA and the various clubs will go, we'll make less money that way. And it's a handful of clubs that will make less money that way. So this is the problem when you allow, TV companies to basically dictate tournament formats and fixtures. We're already seeing the debate from football fans not happy with domestically. Here, for example, with the TV schedule laid out and kickoff times, there's a lot of pushback in regards to the TV companies like Sky and TNT Sport here, Amazon to a certain extent, the streaming and TV companies, with how the amount of influence they have on kickoff times, and yet the 3 p.m. kickoffs are still blacked out, which fans hate. Because everywhere else around the world, all football matches can be seen. But not here. Fans pissed off with that. And the leagues and the people in power say it's designed to protect attendances. Piracy is bad. Attendances at some clubs are dropping anyway, and that's with a 3 p.m. blackout designed to protect attendances. So I can't see that. Ticket prices have more of an impact. The thing is, and with the format change, look, it's designed for TV. Very quickly, UEFA will realise it's a crap format, and fans will have already basically said it's a crap format in general. There are those that don't mind it. But there's a lot of people who want it to go back to just straight knockouts and scrap the UEFA club coefficient as well. I'm one of them. Accessibility, TV rights. But when you've got Florentino Perez, that crook in charge of Real Madrid, and I have no shame in saying that, I think he's a bit of a criminal, because Real Madrid have been found guilty of multiple rule breaches, and there's been a lot of dodginess and allegations of corruption in Spain. When he's saying, younger people aren't as interested in football anymore and going to games and interacting. There's several reasons for that. A lot of them are socio-economic. A lot of reasons for that. A, we're earning less money in real terms than our parents were. B, everything's bloody expensive. And C, people like him, with their policies and the way they've run things, have made it so unaffordable because of their own greed to go to games, to buy merchandise, to watch games on TV. And he's trying to blame the TV companies, which make him a lot of money, for this decline. Yeah, I think ticket prices have a massive part to play. I'm going to have to. My back is. I've actually hurt my back at work the other day, a couple of weeks ago, which is not helping, and it's really bloody painful. I basically cracked a couple of ribs and hurt me back at work, so it's a little bit uncomfortable. Right, let's try and get comfortable here. I'm sorry about the glare there. I mean, I could adjust the brightness, but I've got to be able to see the screen, and you guys have got to be able to see me. So I'm just going through all the various brightness settings, but I want it to be visible as possible. I'm just going to leave it as it is. Fuck it. Not a lot I can do. I wouldn't say the lower levels, for example, are rubbish football. I wouldn't say that at all. I would actually say it's actually quite entertaining watching lower league football. The players aren't paid massive amounts. This is what gets me. This is why we're having the discussion about a lot of sports. Look at what's happening with rugby league in this country, with IMG's grading, and how the London Broncos have had a great win today. In fact, they've had 2 great wins in the last couple of weeks, and they're really giving it a crack. And they're basically going to get relegated regardless of where they finish in the league, even though they've beaten Hull. They're now above Hull. I think they're above Hull in the league now. They could finish higher up the table, for example. But as a London Broncos fan, we knew before the season even started that basically Super League and the IMG wanted to relegate us anyway with their grading. And a lot of fans are not happy with if the RFL had a brain, any brain cells in the boardroom, which I don't think they do. Fan feedback, I think that fans aren't happy with how the RFL and bringing IMG in on this long-term partnership. They're not happy with how the game's been governed, the direction the sport's taking, and a lot of people seem to have this false notion that all professional athletes are really well paid. The reality is, football in this country, for example, has distorted the perception of the general public of athlete wages and who's paid what and how much salaries are worth. For example, it's a distorted narrative. I think less people are playing some sports. Also, I read golf membership and play participation is on the decline. Well, when you take, for example, the US Masters, which is, in my opinion, the greatest golf tournament ever. When you take the Masters and the Open, the 2 biggest majors you can win as a player, off free-to-air coverage, you're going to have a knock-on impact where only wealthier people can afford the TV subscription or the streaming subscriptions. Golf as a sport is seen as elitist and as a stereotype. And I've worked at a golf course, and you do get that perception that it's a very upper class and middle class sport, that it's not really a sport for working class people. And I think that's an unfair perception, but access is key as well. And golf clubs have noticed that, people are spending less money. They're not paying their memberships, and they want to make the same amount of money. And they've got their own bills to pay. Golf clubs, they've got their maintenance to pay, they've got to pay their staff, so they're going to rack the membership prices up, and that will put people off taking up and playing the sport. Now, we know a lot of football players and rugby league players and rugby union players like a round of golf. We know a lot of athletes like a round of golf, right? And a lot of pro sports athletes actually come from working class backgrounds, so there is that. But there is that perception that the sport is elitist, a perception. But a lot of the lads I work with do play golf, and then you hear some of the prices that are charged for day tickets just to, as a non-member to go versus membership, and you're thinking that's expensive. But yeah, no, definitely that you will find down the country club kind of stereotype. Yes, it is a great sport. Don't get me wrong, I used to love watching it, but you take it off free to air TV coverage, you put it behind a paywall, and that's your first step in cutting off access. Accessibility is key for sports. Access is, it's a big thing. But no, golf viewership figures declining. Yeah, that's been known for years. And now with golf, with the battle between LIV and the PGA and the PGA tours, so you've got the European and Asian and North American tours, and the split in golf. That doesn't help when there's that perception of instability within the sport, and the perception that the players are greedy and the player agents are greedy, because players will have agents who sort out their sponsorship deals, their contracts. And when you have that perception, it puts people off as well, especially at a time when there is less money around for people. People aren't as well off as what they were 10, 15 years ago. Prices and costs have gone up. Salaries aren't keeping pace in real terms. Yeah, we have seen, there's a lot of labour unrest. There's a huge amount of people unemployed at the moment. The unemployment rate is something to consider. People are, spending less money. And that perception, when you have what's happening in golf, which has happened in every major sport where there's unrest between the playing group and the administrators and the tournament organisers. We've seen it with rugby league in the 90s with the Super League, or we've seen it in the NHL with the player strikes and lockouts since the mid-90s till now. Admittedly, now there's a better relationship between the NHLPA and the NHL, but I remember very vividly in the mid 2000s when the whole season was wiped out, 2004, 2005. The perception was the players were greedy because the team owners and the league, they're the ones with the media contracts. They're the ones who have the relationships with the mainstream media, and it was put out there the perception that the players were greedy. And then you've got, we've just had, obviously not long ago, Major League Baseball had a lockout. And again, the perception was by some players are greedy, although that narrative is being challenged. But when you have a playing group that's divided and a lot of money being thrown around, and the perception, and these are, not all golf players make, golf pros make a lot of money. A lot of them make decent money, but very, very few are multi-millionaires who could just retire tomorrow. A lot of them aren't as well off as we think. The perception is, though, with your Tiger Woods and your Rory McIlroys, that all golf players are that wealthy. That's not the case. But when you hear about the divisiveness within the sport and where the money's going, and a lot of big numbers being thrown around. And clearly administrators, those governing the sport, those organising the sport, are at war with each other. And then you've got, players on one side or the other coming out in the media and having their say. What needs to be remembered is, as I say, there's that perception that all golf players are all really wealthy, really, they could all retire tomorrow if, they play a tournament and go, I'm going to hang the golf clubs up. I'm going to hang this, put the golf clubs away, and I'm going to live a life of luxury and leisure at my own pace. Some of them could do that. Most can't, because they're paid by tournament. So when they finish in a tournament, they are actually paid by, some of them actually have to pay to play, and will be journeymen, and they won't make a lot of money. So when we look at all sports at a professional level, and I do stress this, there is a perception that all professional athletes are all really well paid. They're all multi-millionaires. and that isn't the case. Isn't the case. But I do agree that golf has declined in popularity. It is becoming more expensive to play. It's becoming more expensive to watch, partly because of the TV deals that are currently placed here. I don't know what the TV deals are like around the world, but I know here it's all behind a paywall now, so there's less access to the major tournaments. And the two major tournaments that I used to love watching were the Open and Augusta, the Masters. They were the two tournaments that I would always watch growing up, and now I can't because they're behind a paywall, and I refuse to pay for Sky TV. Sorry, not doing it. Not doing it. For me, because the Masters obviously takes place in the US and you've got that time difference, it was sort of a treat to stay up to watch that. Whereas the Open is played later in the year, but the Masters, it was a treat to watch all 4 days and actually be allowed to stay up late at night and watch, watch the Masters. It was for me. It was. My family aren't really golf fans, so to speak. But it was seen as a bit of a treat for me. Very early on, my parents realised I was a bit sport mad. And to be fair, my dad was a massive sports fan as well, which I think helped. But he wasn't really a major golf fan. But you could put anything on. You could put Eurosport on, for example, or Sky Sports, or ESPN, or whatever sports network you wanted, and I would sit there all day and watch it. So, as I say, I used to happily watch all 24 hour of Le Mans. I mean, my mother thought I was completely insane. Probably right there. But I can happily watch, the 24 hours of Daytona, the 24 hour of Le Mans in a single sitting. And I can do that. Admittedly, I need a lot of caffeine and a lot of nicotine and regular toilet breaks. But I've been known to watch all 24 hours in a single sitting and not go to bed. And you're going a bit loopy when you're actually agreeing with the nighttime commentary on Le Mans or Daytona, because they come out with some really weird stuff. It's quite funny, but really weird stuff. I think it was one year. It was a boring part of the race, Le Mans, and we're talking nothing much is happening. It's the middle of the night. It's about 1, 2 in the morning. Middle of the night, and they're like, how do we stay awake? Because people are obviously on social media and they're heroin, and they're talking about heroin. Like, so don't do that. And they get off, and they come out with some really balmy stuff. I'm not really a golf fan. But the reason why people enjoyed watching the Masters and the Open is they were accessible. They were accessible to the masses on free-to-air coverage, and now that isn't the case. We've seen some great playoffs on the 18th, where several players are tied and they've got to go for a playoff. We've seen some great finishes. And the average working person, can't afford all these TV subscriptions, who, by the way, have all raised their prices yet again. And it is becoming very unaffordable. And it is seen as one of those sports that is now seen as very, very elitist. And I have work colleagues who say, well, just get a VPN. Just change your location. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's still costing me money. And it's something that I've always said I wouldn't do. I've always said I wouldn't do it. John Van de Velde at the 99 Open was the most crushing capitulation. There's been a few. I remember, is it Greg Norman at the Masters? Had his implosion on the last day. Rory McIlroy seems to do it a lot at the moment. There's a few players that've just fallen apart under pressure on the last day of a major or any golf tournament. There were, and Rory McIlroy is one that sticks in my mind lately, having a few meltdowns. But I do remember 99 quite vividly, and that complete and utter nightmare of the 18th hole. because I was watching it. But it's not often we talk about, golf on this channel, but it is one of those sports that, as I say, is seen as very elitist, um, and out of reach for most people, and a lot of working class people potentially, especially in the big inner city estates, and then in certain areas of the country, probably have no interest in the sport whatsoever. Because it is seen as the old boys club, and female players and female fans have felt that as well. I still believe there's a certain number of golf courses that are male only courses as well. Now, and there was, I think, one golf course got awarded the Open one year, and there was a lot of frustration and anger at it because it didn't allow female members or female players. Yeah, it's going to have to allow female fans, right? Right, you would have thought. So there is that perception that it is elitist, and there is that perception that it is an old boys club in regards to the administration of the sport and golf clubs. And there's been a few, I'm going to call them ugly incidents involving players where they've been caught on a hot mic, caught by fans, watching. There was one with Tiger Woods where there was a highly inappropriate joke, where it is seen as a very old boys club, old school kind of, I wouldn't say values, but a perception of a male dominated sport with a chauvinistic approach to things, and it isn't truly representative of modern fandom, modern society, and a lot of modern views. It's that time. We'll put on your green jacket. Welcome to the club. How does it feel? Feels great. Oh, yeah. I mean, at the end of it, where previous winner, the previous champion, gives out the next green jacket, and in some cases, that previous champion, yeah. I mean, look, there is that. The women's game has definitely grown quite massively over the last 2 decades and has come a long way. But there is still that perception as a sport that it's very elitist, very white middle class. I think it's a good way to look at it. Although players like Vijay Singh and Tiger Woods, for example, as two of the outliers, have bucked that narrative over the last 2 to 3 decades in regards to it all being white middle class men playing it. And there's a lot of Japanese and Korean golfers, both men and women, who've done very, very well in the sport as well. But I can't remember. I mean, I don't really follow women's golf, but I do know there's a lot of Korean, Japanese, and I think Taiwanese, or Thai, as in Taiwan, Taiwanese, Chinese, who've done quite well in the women's game. There's a lot of Asian players from, we're talking Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and I think the Philippines have produced a few female players. Has done quite well. And of course, Tiger Woods was that outlier, and Vijay Singh was that outlier as well, with players of non-white background doing, winning majors, and of course, Tiger Woods being one of the best, if not the best player of all time. KJ Choi, there's a few. There's a few Asian players who've done quite well over the years, but again, there is still that perception. Even these Asian players are from the middle classes. That's the perception. Well, KJ Choi, yeah, he's very short. He's only about 5'1", 5'2". He's not a big bloke. Whereas Vijay Singh is one of the tallest players on the tour, and KJ Choi was quite a short player on the tour. So you've got that height disparity. Yeah, I mean, it's not often we talk about golf at all, and it's an interesting perspective that you as a viewer have, and saying, hey, this is a sport that I can't get into for these reasons, or I don't watch anymore for these reasons. But you were never a massive fan, although you did dip in and out. This is the problem golf's facing, is attracting those casual viewers like yourself. Well, with golf, you have to be tall. No, you just have to have a good swing technique and good club selection. I think the perception you have to be tall is a myth with golf, because players can drive it stupid lengths, and then their short play is hopeless. It's all about your technique and how you transfer the power of your swing into connecting with the ball in the right way to then get the right shot selection. It's a very tactical game. People think golf is just, white middle class men on the weekend escaping their wives, disappearing down the golf course. No, to actually be a professional golfer, there is technique with the swing, transfer of power, shot selection, working out wind direction. Do I put spin on the ball? Angling it, approach to the next phase of play on the fairway or onto the green, avoiding the bunkers or the water hazards. Golf courses are designed to be challenging. It's more than just whacking a ball and basically walking around. There is a lot of thinking that goes behind it. It's a very technical sport. But that perception you've got to be tall is, don't listen to that. Height doesn't always equal great technique or power at all. People say all fast bowlers in cricket need to be over 6 foot tall. That is, again, it helps. It's not necessarily the case. If you've got great technique and you can transfer, that power from your body with a good run up and good release point, you can be a shorter fast bowler and be like a Darren Goff or a Hoggard and still take a fair few hundred wickets at test level. You don't have to be a Morne Morkel kind of up there. It does help if you want to have bouncers, but then swing and in swing and Yorkers and then skidders and all that. It helps in certain aspects, doesn't always help in others, because again, technique, release point, and accuracy are also vitally important as a cricketing bowl. It's time to play, and also where's the time to fit it in with work, etc. There is that. It's golf tournaments last 4 days. From Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's a 4-day kind of. If you're going for a tournament, if you're going just for a round of golf, that could be a 9-hole, could be 18. That's different. That's generally a weekend activity for most people. But to actually be a proper amateur on the amateur circuit, wanting to become professional or a professional, it's a 4-day thing. That's a 4-day thing. You've got your Thursday through to your Sunday. Actually tournament, and then you get Monday to Wednesday to get a bit of practice in, or a day off here or there, and then you're into the next tournament. And lower ranked professionals, they go from tournament to tournament. They don't have they literally are barely making money. They're reliant on sponsorship. They're relying on have that one good finish to get some decent prize money. They're reliant on being that guy who gets the hole in one, for example, or gets the only albatross of the competition. Like we're talking shots under par here. Well, my thoughts on Novak Djokovic and his achievements. He's a complex character, is Novak Djokovic. He is. But look, he's an Olympic champion. He's won all these major honours. But he's a very divisive figure when it comes to tennis. And tennis is very similar to golf. As I say, the lower ranked professionals are going from tournament to tournament and scraping and scraping by, and we're talking not making a lot of money because they're reliant on prize money and sponsorship and getting that bit of exposure. I know, but Djokovic is a machine. I don't think he's got long left, to be fair, as a top level. I do think his career is starting to wind down. I would say he's got 2, maybe 3 years at most, and then the turning of the tide. But there's a lot of hungry younger players who are now starting to win titles and compete and win majors and grand slams, as they say in tennis. What ranking? You just need to win that 1 or 2 good tournaments and get a good run at a grand slam, and suddenly you're noticed, and then you get bumped up the rankings and you get to play at those higher ranking tournaments. Djokovic is 37. When do I see him retiring? As I say, I think he's got 1-2 years left. I can see him going. He'll be retired before the next Olympics. He'll be on the seniors tour if he decides to play on the seniors tour. But Nadal said this is his last year. Andy Murray's gone. Federer's gone. Del Potro's gone. Is Cilic still playing? I'm trying to think of other players who've won major Grand Slams in the last 20 years. And we are starting to run out of players who won Grand Slams at over the age of 30, 35 who are still playing. Basically, all his major rivals have all retired or are near retired. Alcaraz, I think, is one of them, and Cilic, I think, are 2 players who are still active who've won Grand Slams. Nadal's basically said he's done at the end of the year. Murray's just retired. And there is contemporaries. If Del Potro was not playing on one leg for half his career, he could have won a lot more. But as I say, we are reaching that point where I would say if injuries don't impact him too much, potentially, I would say another 2 full years after this year, he might go past 40. And I say might, because one major injury and then that's him done. Quite honestly, he's had issues with his elbows. I know he's had a lot of arm and shoulder and elbow injuries, and there are some fitness issues. But compared to Nadal, for example, I think Cilic's had a few injuries, so in that regard, when it happens, when his form drops off a cliff, you'll know about it. When it completely goes, it will go quick. But at the moment, I think, as I say, I think he's still got a good solid a year or 2 left in him before he calls it a day. But I don't know. He reached the Wimbledon final with a major injury. Is that testament to how good he is, or is the field pretty poor average in your opinion? I would say it's going to be interesting to see what the next 5 to 10 years in professional tennis looks like, considering that only a handful of players really have dominated for the last 20. And it's just been dominated by a handful of players. But when it happens to Djokovic, when his form goes, it will go quick. And it will be very noticeable when he just goes off a cliff, and that's him done. But did he win Wimbledon? No. I think a lot of players play through injury. I think people, again, think tennis, they're all these, again, this perception it's a very elitist sport. I think a lot more could be done at grassroots level and done to make it easier for people to get into the sport and develop. There's definitely issues with the talent depth in a lot of countries, and getting the grassroots to work and getting people filtering through the system. If it wasn't for both Jamie and Andy Murray, for example, and Evans and a few other British players, it's very noticeable we don't have talent depth. Once you get past Evans in, for example, and Norrie, the talent depth disappears. And Jamie Murray, notwithstanding on the men's side of things, very noticeable we don't have a lot of high-profile players after that. I think both Andy and Jamie Murray helped change the narrative after Henman when they came along. Jamie Murray obviously still active in the doubles, and he's been very, very successful. Doesn't get the gratitude, I think, from the mainstream media and the plaudits he deserves. Andy Murray, obviously, big thing for a long period of time. But yeah, the talent drop off is very marketed and very obvious. It's very noticeable. It's a very marked drop off in talent. I think a lot more could be done at grassroots level to improve participation and pathways. I think that is something that I think we could do more of. But again, where's the money coming from to do that? And you know, you enjoy cricket, golf, and American sports now. That's everyone has their own preferences. Everyone has their own preferences with what sports they like, what sports they dislike, why they like those sports, why they dislike certain sports. I don't knock anyone. I mean, I'm not a fan of basketball, but I understand why there are people who are. I understand why people enjoy playing and watching basketball. And yes, the NBA is the biggest league, but then you look at some of the European players and the amount of investment and the quality of the European leagues, I can understand why. I wouldn't say many people don't play in Britain. I would just say that again, there is that perception it is a wealthy person's sport. You need to have money and a lot of free time to participate. You either have money or free time. If you have both, you are very likely to get your kids into tennis academies and play yourself as an amateur or as a club member and enjoy it as a sport. But I do think the perception is it's you've got to have money to play. You've got to make a lot of sacrifices to be a professional tennis player of any standing, and it's not a sport. It's an individual. It's like snooker. You are reliant on your. It's like golf and snooker because snooker's not a sport. It is. You are reliant on your prize money to make a living. And then if you get good enough, you might get some decent sponsors slapping their logos on your person, your personal sponsors, and you make some money through sponsorship. Now, as I say, a lot of professional tennis players, snooker players, and golf players are barely scraping a living because they've got to pay, especially tennis and golf players. They've got golf players got to pay his caddy. Tennis players have got to pay their coaches. And so there will be that you've got to pay these people for working for you and working with you, and then you've got to pay your bills like mortgages, internet, for example, your basic bills, your food, your accommodation when you're at events. You don't actually make a lot of money at the lower levels. Hope work is going good. It was, yeah. Well, yeah. I've worked the two hottest days so far. In fact, I've worked all the hot days this year, apart from a couple of days at the weekend. It's been nice having some nice weather. Last summer, obviously, was a bit of a washout. It's basically rained for 10 months, and now suddenly we get this period of nicer weather. With a thunderstorm in between, two little heat waves. I will say this: it is not as hot as what it was 2 years ago, where I worked the hottest was it the hottest week of the whole year? The hottest days. I worked all the hot days like 2 years ago, and that was brutal and wasn't pleasant. But no, yeah, the weather's been. It's different. I mean, I've worked obviously in all conditions. I prefer it slightly cooler than it is now. So I prefer spring and autumn. Really, they're my favourite times to do my job because the weather's a bit more bearable. I like it pleasant and bearable. I mean, obviously we've had so much rain the last 12 or so months that with my job it's not been as pleasant. But the weather for most of this summer actually hasn't been too cold. It's just rained a lot, but the last little bit of July, August, it has been quite warm. I've obviously, as you can see, got a bit of a tan. You can see my glove tan line, big man. See my big glove tan lines, and I've got a bit of a tan, which is pleasant. And yeah, it's quite pleasant now. I could quite happily sit outside and sit on my little patio for an hour or so now, but it's starting to get dark and it would be quite pleasant outside. But yeah, where I think we're going to have some more warm weather before the summer's done. I think we're going to have a few more warm days throughout August and into September. I think we're still going to have some hot days, and I think this winter could be quite a cold, snowy one. But that's my opinion on the weather. Basketball, not a fan. The scoring is too end-to-end, too high scoring. Basketball is one of those sports where I've watched it. I've got friends who are massive fans of basketball, and I appreciate that, and I can appreciate the skill level required to be an NBA player or play in any of the European leagues, and to be a professional basketball player. I can understand that. I can appreciate that. But yeah, I can't get into it where it's just ridiculously the scoring is ridiculous. And a lot of people have that complaint about the sport that it's too the score lines being ridiculous make it a lot harder to enjoy and get into the sport. And I accept that. It's not a sport that I really enjoy. As I say, I prefer the more brutal contact team sports. The sports with a bit of brutality and a bit of like a gladiatorial aspect to them. You can see my tan on my arm versus my legs, my pasty white legs. But yeah, no, I can completely understand why, for example, a lot of sports fans and those who are really hardcore sports fans go basketball, not so much. But the pace of the game is fantastic. I do appreciate the pace of the game and the skill set required, the hand-eye coordination required, and the skill set required to play. I never enjoyed playing because I didn't have the skill set, and I not that I couldn't get my head around the rules. I can, but I just did not get my head around it. But it's a sport that definitely will attract younger fans to it. I think with the speed of play, also how it's marketed as well. But where does it rank? It ranks quite highly in participation levels. When it comes to making money, the NBA is tied with Major League Baseball. It's above the NHL, which wasn't always the case. So in the 70s and the 80s, the NHL, ironically, with all its issues, actually made more money than the NBA. The NBA was in serious trouble in the 70s. And then Larry Bird came along and the NBA had their first marketable star. People have this stereotype that all NBA players are African American. They're not. If it wasn't for Larry Bird coming along for the Boston Celtics, the NBA would still be in serious trouble because I don't think Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, and going onwards, because how to put it, when the time Larry Bird comes along, the sport is in trouble, massive financial trouble. Wasn't going very well. Wasn't making as much money as the other major leagues, and was struggling. Larry Bird changed the direction the sport took because they had a marketable athlete. And then you get the Chicago Bulls and you get the Lakers, and the rest is history. You get the Dream Team and all that, right? You get, if it wasn't for Larry Bird, you don't have Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Dennis Rodman, Shaquille O'Neal, etc., because the money wasn't there. They wouldn't have got paid the money they ultimately got paid. The teams were struggling. TV ratings were down. Larry Bird comes along and the Boston Celtics at that time, and suddenly, there you go. Yeah, there are some short players who play guard, yes. Do you think, what do I think, what Great Britain and there's got to be a lot more investment, and the sport's got to grow here to a point where it's profitable. The league isn't profitable enough. There isn't the spare TV money about, because of the obsession with the Premier League. I mean, if rugby league, which is an established league that's been going since 1895, as in a professional sense, is struggling as it is, with attendances and clubs struggling to pay bills and not selling out stadiums and the issues there, and rugby union, which is an established sport that's been established for a long time, obviously been professional for a long time now, are struggling financially. I don't know how basketball's gonna compete with the more established traditional sports in this country where they were invented here. I worry, but at the same time, there is an opportunity if the university system can get on board, and use of facilities and working with communities, with professional teams, having relationships with universities, saying, can we use your facilities, please? Because universities need money because they've got less overseas students. So there is an option potentially as a way of getting around it, but it's I don't know. I think on a European aspect, the leagues in France, Spain, the Balkans, even Italy, for example, better supported, better facilities, especially in the Mediterranean countries where it gets really hot in the summer. So playing sport inside in an air-conditioned building, it's a thing, especially at school. School sports hall. That's where the word gymnasium comes from. In Germany, you don't call it high school, you call it gymnasium. So you play a lot of your sports in the sports hall. Basketball's an indoor sport. You have the facilities there. It's part of the culture. It's part of the sporting culture. So until we look at facilities, it's a participated sport, yes, but will it compete? I don't know. Michael Jordan will always be the biggest superstar. Biggest superstar of the 90s, yeah. But you need Larry Bird to come first. Larry Bird comes first to become that first international. People know who Larry Bird is over here. Without Larry Bird, you don't get Michael Jordan and the Dream Team and the Chicago Bulls and onwards. Because before Larry Bird, the sport was in such a bad state and the league was in such a bad state. You needed that catalyst. For me. For me, you needed that catalyst, and that was Larry Bird. Now, yeah, Michael Jordan became bigger than Larry Bird and is more recognizable now than Larry Bird, as is Shaquille O'Neal, who's done a lot of stuff outside basketball. I think Shaquille O'Neal is potentially a more well-known figure now than Michael Jordan. But without those three, those three players, the NBA is not what it is today, and where it stands in revenue, player salaries, you know, recognizable talent. The NBA learnt a lot of things in the 80s and 90s that has established itself now. The five top British sports, you got to go with football, rugby union, I would say cricket, rugby league, and ice hockey would be your 35. And they're all professional sports, so the rugby league's in trouble. In regards to what's my favourite out of rugby union and rugby league, I would say rugby league's my favourite, but I prefer the NRL, which is down in Australia and New Zealand, although I prefer international rugby union over international rugby league because it's better organised. There you go. That's the best way to describe the two codes. Not too knowledgeable on rugby, but I know one of them is popular enough. He's got a point. When you get north of Birmingham, it's rugby league. South of Birmingham, it's rugby union. Is a good way to look at it. When the language changes from Brummie to indistinguishable grumpy northerner, that's cheerful northerner, depending on where you are in the north. That's where union gives way to league. It's the best way to describe it. But there are rugby union clubs in the north of England, and there are rugby league clubs in the south of England. So let's defeat that north. I think where rugby league is shooting itself in the foot is the IMG grading and not growing the game in non-traditional locations, and a sort of conservatism within the fan base. Go, I don't want to travel to the East Midlands. I want to stay in the. There's a proportion of fans want to keep it in the M62. They don't like growing the game, and the RFL are incompetent in governing the game. Well, not many top rugby union clubs up north, Sale and Newcastle, but they're there and they've been successful. You've got Yorkshire Carnegie, formerly known as Leeds. You've got Doncaster. I think Grantham has a decent. Rotherham's got a decent club as well. There's a few, but you notice rugby league is more dominant in the north, and then from the Midlands southwards, it's more rugby union. In saying that, I think eventually the game is going to grow. Rugby league is going to grow in the Midlands and the South. I think it will eventually happen, and rugby union needs to look at its own fine. But both sports are struggling financially at the moment, although that's down more to do with the governance side of it and the powers that be and the deals they strike with sponsors, TV or streaming services, accessibility, ticket prices, etc., etc. Where does the North start? For me, it's the Watford Gap. Now, honestly, when we talk about the North and the South, I mean, where does it start? I would say anywhere outside of London is anywhere outside of the major cities is what I would call proper UK. So if you're in Scotland, proper Scotland is outside Edinburgh and Glasgow and Aberdeen. That's proper Scotland. That's where you're going to meet the proper people who, England, for me, too London, Manchester and Birmingham centric. If you think about it, you could argue Leeds and Sheffield as well over in Yorkshire. But when you get out of the big cities, you see real England, Wales. Take away Cardiff and Swansea, you've got real Wales, for me, in my opinion. And Ireland is just don't go to Dublin and Belfast for both Northern Ireland and the Republic. You want to go out and explore a little bit, would be my personal opinion. Whenever I've travelled to various places in various countries in Europe, I like to avoid the big cities. Not because I hate cities, I don't mind going to big cities, but you'll find that people are more friendly and more welcoming, and you get a more of a sense of what it's really like to be a local and the local culture. If you go to a small town or a small village, off the beat track a little bit, but not too much, and you want to have a little explore of a little town, you'll find the people are more friendly, they're more relaxed. There's a slight lessening of the pace of life a little bit, and it's a more fun experience. More Union flags in Edinburgh than I see in the West Midlands. That's an interesting one. I would say that Birmingham is a less wealthy city than Edinburgh. Birmingham and the West Midlands in general has a lot of socio-economic problems. A lot. And I've spent a lot of time in the West Midlands throughout my life. I've worked in the West Midlands. My dad lived in the West Midlands before he passed away. My family on both sides has got a connection with the West Midlands, so I've been there a lot. I've done some contract jobs in Birmingham. I've been in the area a lot, as I say, and yeah, I've got family connections to Dudley. I've been to Dudley more than once. I've been to Dudley. Dudley, nice castle and zoo, and the rest of it's a bit depressing. But I've been to Dudley. I've been to Dudley a fair few times. It's not too bad. It's not as bad as Walsall. Let's just down the road, Walsall. You don't get me started on the depressing. Do we mean the West Midlands areas or a region, or are they two different things? Do we mean the West Midlands area or region? Well, I would say the West Midlands goes from Coventry, Birmingham, Wolverhampton, Walsall, Dudley. I'm now actually saying the place names as a Black Country person. So you've got Coventry, Birmingham, Wolverhampton, Dudley, Walsall, Solihull. I would say not well. They say it includes Shropshire. I wouldn't go that far. I would say Shrewsbury and Telford would not, for me, be West Midlands. That's Shropshire. So that's basically nearly Welsh, slightly confused people, not posh enough to be Cheshire, but not peasanty enough to be Welsh. I've got a good friend who lives in Telford, and I've been to Shropshire a lot. So I'm not going to knock that part of the world. It's an interesting part of the world. But no, Birmingham and the surrounding cities like Coventry and Wolverhampton in the West Midlands, there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of deprivation, and there's a lot of poverty and just a lot of issues. And that's borne out in the sports teams. That's borne out in the fandom of Birmingham City, of Aston Villa, of West Brom, of Wolverhampton, Walsall. You can see it borne out on in the fan bases. But East Midlands is Leicester, it's Nottingham. That's your East Midlands cities, and then Nottingham, you're not that far from Sheffield. And then you're in Yorkshire, and then you're in across the Pennines, you're in Lancashire, and there is that. Walsall, I've done the club history video of Walsall a couple of years ago. Very old club. Very, very old club. Go back a very, very long way. But the West Midlands, if it's not for the West Midlands and the North West, so we are talking, apart from Sheffield Wednesday is the odd one in the foundation of the Football League because they're from Yorkshire. If it's not for the West Midlands and North and Lancashire, basically, you don't have professional football. If it's not for and the Football Alliance is the East Midlands and Yorkshire. That's the thing to notice. So if you don't really have basically the Midlands and bits of Yorkshire and most of the Northwest, you don't have professional football and you don't have professional rugby league because of Yorkshire and Lancashire and you don't have it. So that's something that's very, very interesting with our sports history. also do really well. But yeah, they do, considering the fact that Walsall haven't really, with their history going back as far as they have, you know, been more successful is very interesting. You look at the foundation of the Football League and the Football Alliance members who joined the Football League. It's something worth looking at more. Is looking at the Football League and the Football Alliance and how we end up where we are all the way later today. And you look at the geographical area, and it's the southern half of that is the Midlands, the northern half of that is rugby league country, and then rugby league is not that long after comes along and splits from rugby union, and you can definitely see the birthplace of professional sport in this country is the Midlands and Lancashire and Yorkshire. So there's that. Um, um, Walsall Stadium is really disproportionate. What the Bestcott? I think it is still called the Bestcott, if I remember rightly. I've been past Walsall Stadium. It has hosted Women's England internationals. It's an interesting facility. I think it's a good way to describe Walsall's home ground. My thoughts on the 100: don't care about it. Have no care for it. It doesn't solve cricket's problems. It's a reactionary competition brought in to try and fix the problems that the ECB have caused. The ECB have made some real bad commercial decisions 20 years ago that they're trying to fix now with the 100. I've never been a fan of it. And when you can't get players like Ben Stokes to play in it, it sums up the competition for what it is. No one likes it. The EC, look, the only I have a theory when it comes to sports administration. Whoever came up with the 100 was not a cricket person. They were not someone who has played the game at a decent level, at any level, and they weren't someone who has clearly watched cricket for any length of time. That person was not a cricket person. That person was a TV executive or a media executive or a sponsorship executive, someone who has watched a lot of sport from the US, watched a lot of sport from, let's say, Australia or something like that, an international kind of person, hasn't watched a lot of cricket, probably not played it, and the ECB are like, we need to come up with some ideas to try and get fans back to the game. Is that, do we have to go, you know, whatever those ideas were? And I'll say this. This sounds like a movie or TV executive from the 80s or 90s who was in a meeting, did a shed load of Colombian white powder, had some strippers come in, or ladies of the night, went, let's do this. Because it doesn't, and I always say that, like the cocaine and hookers joke, but it seems like it was done by an advertising executive or a media executive or someone brought in from, like IMG are doing now with rugby league in this country. Someone who's never watched the sport, never played the sport, doesn't understand the fans. The governing body, in this case, the ECB in this country, very concerned about viewership figures dropping off, less money, the sport becoming a bit, I don't know, players becoming less recognisable, so they can't market the talent in the way they did leading up to 2005. And they've come along and go, look, we need some, thoughts. We need to reformat something. We need to look at something. We need to, try and entice younger fans back, families back. And from what I can gather, and my perception is, it seems like that kind of joke meeting, like Mad Men or Wolf of Wall Street, where they haven't just they got it wrong. Yeah, no, I'm yet to meet a cricket fan who likes the 100. Yet to. There's a simple solution to the ECB's problems. Put the fucking test matches back on free-to-air coverage. There you go. I've just solved their problems in a nutshell. But it means they make less money off the TV companies because free-to-air doesn't have the same financial clout, Sky or TNT, but put it back on free to air. It's not hard. Short-term losses for long-term gain. They're just, but yeah. What you think? London has the most football clubs per city in the world? I think you might find in Brazil these days that Sao Paulo and Rio might match London for clubs at all levels playing at amateur, semi-pro, and professional level. But I wouldn't be surprised if London is the city with the most clubs, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a city in South America that could equal London when it comes to football clubs at all levels of the game. Yes, you could have Manchester, the Northwest, could have its own league. They did. It's called the Football League back in the day. London could have its own league. Yes, you could have a whole professional structure in London. Birmingham, or the West Midlands, Birmingham, potentially, but the money isn't there. But yeah, half the Turkish league is from Istanbul. Yeah, Istanbul. Istanbul is a similar city in size to London. So is Ankara is not much smaller. Ankara and Istanbul are actually two rather massive cities. People don't realise how big those two cities actually are. I think London has more football teams in the 92 than New York. Right, now, are we including the entire New York metro? Because that includes New Jersey. So in the NHL, if you're excluding the Devils from New Jersey, who play in Newark, which is just across the Hudson, but it's still part of the metro, you've got the Rangers, the Islanders, that's the NHL. NBA is it the Knicks and the Mets? NFL, it's the Giants and the Jets. Major League Baseball is the Yankees and is it the New York Mets again? Metropolitans. Yeah, no. London has more football clubs in the top 92 than New York does in the four major leagues in the US, Canada. Yes, and I'm just doing that by excluding teams that have New Jersey in the name. So taking the Devils out. Yeah, I knew it was the Nets. And I'm just doing that off the top of my head. So I was just doing that off the top of my head, which is ridiculous that I did it that quick. But yeah, London has more clubs in the top levels of English football than all the major leagues in North America put together. Yet New York is a city of similar size to London, or slightly bigger. It's ridiculous. And then we talk about metro areas; they're about the same. If you include New Jersey, well, that's why I was saying if you take out the New Jersey Devils, and again, off the top of my head, it's one of them. It's ridiculous. But again, you've got to look at how the sports are structured in regards to professionalism versus amateur status versus the collegiate system. The North American sporting system is completely different to Europe, I would think the average American, I don't think, fully appreciates how how the system works. I don't want to say that with any nastiness, but if you were to take like a North American fan who's never watched football before, throw them in London and go, right, they would know about your Chelsea, your Arsenal, your Tottenham, for example, potentially Crystal Palace, potentially Brentford. We're talking some of the slightly lesser top flight clubs, and then throw them into like a Leyton Orient Charlton game. They wouldn't have necessarily heard of Leyton Orient Charlton or Millwall. They might have heard of Millwall. You've got West Ham as well. You've got Barnet. You've got AFC Wimbledon. You've got QPR. You've got Bromley. You've got Sutton United. I mean, yeah. You've got Dagenham and Redbridge. You could throw them in any, and I think they would. You've got Fulham. I mean, I'm still naming London clubs. Or do I prefer the North American sporting system? I think you have to look at it in a context and go, it's their system. And the NHL team that I'm a fan of is from Canada, so that's thinking. Do I prefer their system? I think you have to look at it and understand it in the context of how their sporting system has evolved and how it's structured and how it's culturally ingrained in their sporting society. It's a different way of looking at it. And on the flip side, North American fans look at our sporting system, the promotion relegation aspect, especially with football, but with other sports as well, and they go, well, that's the unique thing about Europe compared to us, is it's different. And it has history behind it. And the majority of our sports teams are older than teams in North America. In fact, I think I would say 90% of our sports teams are probably older than the majority of cities in North America. And you've got to bear that in mind, as well as the historical community aspect and how things happened and how leagues became structured and how leagues grew and evolved and how clubs were founded and competition comes about. And yes, you could argue, baseball similar in regards to the history, but again, the structures behind it and how we have promotion relegation and they don't, and how in regards to the talent, how many professional teams we have in let's say football, and the depth of the system to semi-pro, semi-pro status and even down to amateur status, where they're still part of the same. In theory, you can go from down there to up there through merit, through promotion, through hard work, and growing and building. It's definitely something that North American fans, when they fully understand and start researching the history behind it and looking at the structures and the history behind it, going, oh, wow. And it's the same with rugby union as well, and same with rugby league. The promotion and relegation aspect and the club foundations and going up through the pyramid system from point A to point B, you can see they understand and appreciate the culture behind that and the history behind that. And, they like the uniqueness behind it. And it's the same. Ice hockey does try it in some countries, the promotion relegation aspect. They tried it here, it didn't work. They do it in Sweden, they do it in the Czech Republic, for example, that promotion relegation aspect. I think they're doing a lot of the European leagues with the promotion relegation thing in the top 2 or 3 professional tiers in Sweden and things like that. And it has mixed results. I don't think ice hockey you can truly do it on the same level as in rugby union or rugby league or football. Again, this is a concept that most Americans find alien to them. But at the same time, they have a very strong as NCAA collegiate system, and there's faults with that system, and there's issues with that system that we have discussed before, and has been well documented, the issues that the collegiate system has with the NCAA, and there are issues there. But as I say, they have the junior leagues, a draft system, and or collegiate system going into draft system, and then the professional leagues with the minor leagues, and then the big leagues at the top. And yeah, it's a completely different system than we have over here. But there we go. Top 10 ranking. Oh God, I would have to go through all my football club history videos to rank the London clubs. That would be ridiculous. I think Arsenal and Chelsea. I think Arsenal have more league titles than Chelsea. Chelsea have more European and Cup titles than Arsenal. I think it's a way to look at it. Although Arsenal have won more FA Cups. It's a weird one. But Chelsea and Arsenal will be battling for top spot. I think Tottenham would come in third, partly because of all their FA Cups. I think after that it gets interesting. I think West Ham, and then Charlton, QPR. I would do it by trophies rather than by size of fan base, because Charlton, QPR, West Ham, I don't think any of them have won the league, but they've won silverware in cup competitions. I find West Ham interesting. They've never won the league. Really stunning, but it is what it is. No, no, Steve Smith is not the best UK hockey player. I'm assuming you're talking about field hockey, not ice hockey, because he's no. Tony Hand is the best British ice hockey player. I've got a friend called Steve Smith as well, which is really weird. I don't think he's a hockey player. I think he's a really bad DJ, but there we go. There's quite a few Steve Smiths, but I do know a couple of blokes called Steve Smith, and one of them's a DJ. It's not very good. I know a few Steve Smiths actually. I think one's saw a documentary with Steve Smith in the NHL. Yeah, like there's Steve Smith is just like John Smith or Joe Bloggs. It's one of those generic names where a lot of people are called Steve and a lot of people have surname Smith. But no, I don't. Oh, kind of real Steve Smith, please don't. If I was, if I was to walk into a town centre or a city centre and shout, "Could Steve Smith stand up?" I mean, that could get a very mixed response. But no, it's an interesting one. But there's a lot. There's put it into perspective. Sidetrack, but no. Smith is a very common surname, and Stephen is quite a common first name. And so you're more likely to get a Steve Smith than or a John Smith or a David Smith than, I'm just using first names off the top of my head, than other name combinations. Smith is same with Carter, same with especially like, and then you get to Wales like Joneses. That's quite a common surname. Williams, things like that. But yeah, they're quite common. It's quite a common surname, and with slight different spelling variations, but it's quite a common. Hughes is another one. Yeah, Williams is one. So there's some quite common surnames. Steve Smith being one of them. And for some reason, yes. Now I now know why Welsh surnames are as they are with Williams, Jones, Hughes, Roberts. It's a shortened version of Joneson, Williamson, Hewson. It means son of. There you go. That's why you get a lot of first names as surnames in Wales. It's basically an Anglo translating. Yeah, it's just how it comes about. A lot of Irish names are pronounced not as they are spelt. Yes, it's because the Celtic languages are very confusing, as I've found out. And my surname's Irish, for example. But yeah, there's different ways of pronouncing my surname and spelling it as well, which is really annoying when you meet people and they pronounce the surname wrong, and it's really, really frustrating. I've looked at the origins of my surname, and there's about 8 different ways to spell it and 4 different ways to pronounce it. It's just weird. But yeah, the Irish names, some of them are a bit. Some of them are a bit of a tongue twister and a bit frustrating to try and get right. And you've just got to remember that when I was doing my Irish Football Club history series, I I did a lot of practice on my Irish Gaelic just to get some pronunciations right. I still got some of them wrong. Double-barreled surnames when it comes to, or long surnames when it comes to players with player names on jerseys, and they can't quite necessarily fit all the letters on. There are some very, very double-barreled surnames are of great frustration to me. Because if you are a collector of jerseys, or you know, or in my case, when I'm watching, doing a match review, trying to get the names written down and all that, when you got a double-barrel surname, it's really frustrating. Brazilians' nicknames, it's a cultural thing because a lot of Portuguese and Spanish do it, so it's a very cultural thing. Because in Spain they have the double surname, so you have the father's surname and the mother's surname, and then you double barrel it. So, and they always use the father's name in regards to professional, but they always have the mother's name as one of their given surnames as well. But when it comes to a professional setting, you drop the mother's surname and you keep the father's surname for professional, which is why, for example, Fernando Torres is his father's surname, or his father's clan, and his mother's surname is dropped for that. So that's quite interesting. Fernando Llorente used to play for Athletic Bilbao and latterly Spurs. His full name was Llorente Torres, but he dropped the Torres because it's his mum's surname, and you have the father's surname as given, which is interesting because he's also a Torres. But there you go. But Brazilians, it's always nicknames. That's actually a lot of them are nicknames. And so Pele, there was never any. It was Edison something de Silva, I think, was Pele's name. There was a full name or something. Pele is just a nickname that was given to him. A lot of Latin Americans will have their nicknames rather than or a short name, version of their full name. Because if you had their full name, you wouldn't fit it on the back of the jersey. For example, Kempes, Mario Kempes. His full name is, he's got 2 surnames. Brazil was a former colony of Portugal, so that's with Latin names. Well, in Portugal, there's a government list, and this is quite funny. You get given a government list. So when your wife is heavily pregnant, you want to go to the hospital and you want to name your child, you're given a list of 300 names you can choose from to name your baby. Whereas in Brazil, you can name your kid whatever you want. Which is why there's a fair few Linekers in Brazil, because you had Italia 90 and Italia 90, for example, and Mexico in 86. And Gary Lineker was a key part of those England sides that played at those World Cups. Got the golden boot in Mexico in 86. And because Brazil's football mad, they see this English guy called Gary Lineker scoring a lot of goals at international level for England. And there's a lot of kids born in the 80s and into the 90s in Brazil whose first name is Lineker. Yeah. Lineker is a very popular name in Brazil for kids born between 86 and I would say 94. Lineker. Popular name, Brazil. But in Portugal, you are given an official list of what you are allowed to name your child. It's a thing. I only found out about that a couple of years ago, and it was to do with this exact conversation in regards to other countries where Portuguese is spoken as a language, such as Brazil or Angola, for example. And how the government says you can name your kid whatever you want within reason, as long as it's not offensive. In Portugal, you are given an official list where here's the list of names you're allowed to have. you can't name your kid anything else other than this official list. So it's a very interesting one. You don't remember Brazil playing Portugal in football. I think their most famous ever meeting at international level was in 1966 when the Portuguese players kicked the crap out of Pelé and other star players. I think Garrincha as well was another one. Kicked them off the field on their way to the semi-final. They targeted Pelé. They targeted some of the skilled players of the Brazil side, and they hacked the crap out of them. But no, Brazil and Portugal have played internationals against each other. The most memorable one is 1966. There must be someone in Brazil called Lineker Ronaldinho. I think there is a professional player called Lineker. I've actually seemed to remember a professional player called Lineker playing in a Brazil squad. But I do know that Lineker is quite a popular name as a given birth name in Brazil. So is Diego as well. Partly because of Maradona and Diego Forlan. Brazilian parents who like football go, I like Barcelona or I like Man United, and I see these players playing international football. We're football mad. When Brazil aren't playing, we're watching football. There you go. We shall name our child Tevez, because Carlos Tevez actually did play professionally in Brazil at club level for a while, even though he's Argentinian. So yeah, you will find some really bizarre names in Brazil. Testing your sports knowledge, do you know how baseball got popular in Japan? Yes, it was popular before World War II. It was actually popular it was being played in Japan before World War II. And in part, it's because American merchants wanted to open up to Oriental trade, and Japan sits obviously there, and the Japanese wanted also to modernize their economy. And the Pacific is a big ocean, and sailing ships, and there was a lot of emigration between Japan and the US, which is why there's a big Japanese American community in California, and a big Japanese Canadian community in Vancouver. You will notice there's a lot of Oriental people on the West Coast. And then it was actually growing in popularity through the merchants on the cargo ships. Obviously, when a ship would dock, obviously the crew want to have some downtime off the ship, and they would play, and the locals would see them playing, and they would join in, and they would want to play. And then after World War II, obviously the amount of US personnel based over in Japan and Korea, it explodes. That's why Korea and Japan love baseball, because at the time, before World War One and after World War II, when American merchant shipping is going over to Japan and taking, Japanese immigrants back into the US and Canada, when they're over in Japan, they're obviously the crewmen want to play their sports and relax when they're on shore leave, when they're docked up, waiting for the cargo to be unloaded or loaded. They would spend, their time in the port city or town wherever they've docked up. They want to, if they're not wanting to drink, they want to do something. And baseball at the time was the most popular sport in the US, which is why it was known as America's sport. And the Japanese and Koreans over there loved it. And then World War II breaks out. Japan is ultimately defeated. Then we have the Korean War as well. So that's an increase in troop numbers in Japan to then go into Korea to fight the North Korean communist forces, backed by China, obviously. And of course, today we have massive US military presence in Japan and in Korea and in Guam and American Samoa all across the Pacific. There's a big US naval and army presence, even into Australia, for example. And that's why baseball is really, really popular. Although baseball in the US has declined in popularity since the 60s or 70s, it's remained popular in the Philippines, in Japan, in Korea, because of the US personnel that were based there in the 50s after World War II. So that's why baseball's popular in Japan and other Southeast Asian countries or Asian Oriental countries, is because of US merchants and the US military. Yes, cricket is popular across the Commonwealth because of the British Empire, so rugby union, rugby league. Football, again, merchants. You will find that if you look at, follow my football club history series, you look at a lot of the Italian clubs, British industrialists who were merchants or were over advising Italian industrialists how to build their railways, their factories, and get them up to a decent standard before World War One. They wanted all students as well. They wanted some downtime. A lot of international students who had spent some time in the UK, obviously had gone back to Switzerland, Italy, Germany, wherever, and they founded football clubs. I mean, Germania SC was the oldest football club in Germany. That's now Hamburg. Well, became Hamburg. There was a few mergers and splits, but Hamburg is one of the biggest ports in Germany, and of course, you have cargo ships coming in and out. This is before the days of air travel. The way to move bulk cargo quickly is by boat, and or by train, and that's there you go. That's how the Football League really grew, was the away days and the rail network. You will notice a lot of the football clubs, their stadiums are not a million miles away from train stations. There's a reason why Wembley originally was built right by a train station. Yes, Hamburg. Look at the history of Hamburg, the video I did, and look at Germania SC, which is the original, the oldest, what was the first ever club in Germany when it played football, which doesn't exist anymore, but it became St. Pauli and it became Hamburg. It split apart, and then you end up with the football clubs you have in Hamburg today. Well, no, we spread football to those countries, and then we ended up going to South America and going, here's a beautiful game we play. Because before we actually decided to fight Argentina over the Falklands, a lot of British people ended up in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, in Uruguay, in Montevideo, in Sao Paulo and Rio in southern Brazil, and a lot of them were British merchants. There's a massive reason why rugby union is very popular in Argentina, Uruguay, and now Brazil, British merchants. Same in Chile as well, British merchants. Charlie Miller introduced football to Brazil. There you go. There you go. A lot of people don't like Wembley. I'm not a massive fan of it. I think the sightline, as we saw at the Euros final a couple of years ago, security is a big problem. The way it was rebuilt, it should have incorporated the original Wembley Towers. I think it was criminal that they were demolished and weren't protected. And I think a lot of people, even within the Ministry of Sport, the sports minister, I think even now would regret that decision was being taken, and those in the know. There's this dude from TikTok who said football got popular in Brazil because it was a former colony of Portugal. No. There is a lot of real thick people on social media who've been given a voice because they're on social media. There's a lot of really, really retarded people out there who will say crap and people will believe them because it's how you, there's a lot of ignorant people on there as well. I've noticed. And you can get very, very popular by just being an idiot. And then some of the breaking news this week: Tommy Fury and Molly May, whatever her name is, are broken up. Well, yeah. Wow. So there's that. A hopeless boxer who's not very good, and a blonde bimbo who hasn't got a brain. Apparently, they're famous. Apparently, this guy's famous because his brother's. Because his brother's a successful boxer, and she's just there. Wow. I can't stand TikTok. TikTok is what I call brain rot. And yes, there is a lot of people with narcissistic personality disorder who are on there who need to be medicated. No, TikTok, jokes aside and sarcasm aside, because that's the thing. I've never liked TikTok. I'm not a massive fan of Instagram, although I do use it. I find the only platform I actually like is actually YouTube, not because I'm using it now, but I just like how YouTube works. And there's some really good content on YouTube. I'm not a massive fan. I got rid of my Snapchat years ago. And if I'm being brutally honest, I think where we are now from where we were when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I don't like where we're at now in regards to social media. I'm not a massive fan of where we've got to and how we've got to this point. And I have some deep concerns about social media right now. As I say, I'm not happy with where we're at right now in regards to social media, and we've seen some very ugly incidents, obviously, and yeah. When TikTok was first launched, it was all right, so it was just people doing silly dances and posting their dogs. Now it's unbearable. Who'd have thought you could get 27 million subscribers for being obnoxious and screaming in people's faces? The irony is by people saying we should go full communist and block TikTok. It's Chinese. It's Chinese. It's from a communist country. You couldn't make that up. We should go communist and block it, but it's a Chinese social media company. Let that sink in. The irony of your statement. Look, I'm not a massive fan of TikTok. I'm not a massive fan of Instagram's okay to a point. I think what was Twitter, which is now X, is a cesspit. I miss the days of MySpace and Bebo. I think that was a much more innocent time, and what social media should have been. But there we go. Yes, the Bond villain with Elon Musk. I mean, what a name. But he's a Bond villain. So Zuckerberg, who owns Meta. I don't even know who owns Google, but Facebook and the shambles that is a letter of the alphabet, formerly known as Twitter, now known as X, which it was a cesspool of humanity before he bought it. He's now bought it. It continues to be a cesspool. I mean, Threads is another one that Zuckerberg's come up with, which is basically a carbon copy of Twitter. Facebook is far more healthier than X in terms of being less of a cesspool. No, it's not. It's still a cesspool. Personally, I do miss the simpler time in a way. I know it's not sport related, but I do miss the simplicity of the early 2000s, the late 90s, early 2000s, partly because I was younger as well, but I do miss that simplicity of things. But it is what it is. Like, I'm not losing sleep over it, I suppose. Oh, yes, MSN Messenger. Yes, those are the days. MySpace is what social media and MySpace and Bebo is what it should have remained. They were ahead of their time. If you look at what we've got now, MySpace and Bebo, I think, got it right out of the bat, but people didn't realize what they were going to miss until it was gone. So there's that. People didn't realize what they were going to miss until it was gone. Same with BBM Messenger. There was this craze of people getting Blackberries, which is weird because BlackBerry basically gone out of business now. But yeah, there was a big craze in the late 2000s, early 2010s for everyone to get a BlackBerry. I had a BlackBerry for 3 days. I just borrowed one off a mate because I needed a phone for 3 days, and I didn't like using it. Wasn't a massive fan of BlackBerry. People wouldn't talk to each other in person the way they do online these days. It's very rare to have a sensible debate discussion online anymore. Yes, and I can bring sport into this, and I'm going to mention what's happened to Latrell Mitchell because I've been accused of being a troll. Yes, so obviously Latrell Mitchell's caught over the weekend, last weekend, with that photo of him allegedly doing cocaine. He is doing cocaine. There's no allegedly about it. He's been caught, but it's basically facts that he's a cokehead. Let's be honest with this. And I did my video just discussing not just Latrell Mitchell but sport in general, not just rugby league or the NRL, but sport in general, and where I think we're at and what's going on and my views on it. One of the comments. I should go through the comment section because it's very interesting what people have been saying in the comments section and of that particular video. And I've got to get it all up now, so let's get to comments. And we'll go to haven't responded. Right, so we have to go through the comment section of this video. So, Latrell Mitchell under investigation by the NRL Integrity Unit. So, one of my subscribers who has his own channel said, it seems like one drama after another for Latrell Mitchell, and that's fine. So we'll go through that and give that a like. Now, this is a lengthier response to the video. This is another comment. Personally, this viewer goes, personally, I couldn't care less if adults choose to do whatever they want in private. It's their choice. But it may explain why his form and attitude has been so poor this year. NRL players are professional athletes with a loyal fan base who are the heart and soul of the clubs and deserve the and the soul. Oh God, right. So NRL, let me just start this again. So personally, this guy goes, personally, I couldn't care less if adults choose to do whatever they want in private. It's their choice. But it may explain why his form and attitude has been so poor this year. NRL players are professional athletes with loyal fan bases. This is the clubs who are the heart and soul of their clubs, and they deserve the players to be prepared to perform at their best. I think that's what he was trying to say. He worded it a bit badly. Latrell Mitchell needs to own it and apologise to the fans who help pay good money to help pay his wages. That's a good one. Another guy goes, it isn't a good look. He has 2 young kids, but I think he'll get off with a slap on the wrist. Interesting viewpoint, that one. Another one says he'll own it. Fans will get over it quickly, and the haters in the media will have a field day. There's another comment on here. We shall go for held in review. Let's go back to comments. There is another one that says I'm a troll, and I find it funny. And I think he's actually deleted his comment. Yeah, I think he's deleted his comment, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, here we go. This is it. You're just a troll who should mind their own business. Do you even live in Australia? If not, don't talk about us at all. I'm a grub, apparently. Like you, get joy from others' misery. Blah, 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 blah. Go crawl back under your rock. Okay. But I find it interesting. So there's those who are like, he's this. And apparently I'm that. I just find it funny that I'm classed as a troll, apparently, even though I'm just stating actual facts that are in the public domain. But there we go. But no, people wouldn't talk like that in public. And Mike Tyson sums it up perfectly. People have got used to not having someone else turning around and just punching them in the mouth. Mike Tyson has summed it up perfectly. And people have got so used to having people not turning around and smashing them in the face. Mike Tyson went to prison, admittedly for some quite serious offences, but he bit a guy's ear off. But yeah, he has summed up. People got used to getting away with too much and not being held accountable for their actions. And he's spot on. Am I a fan of Mike Tyson? I wouldn't dispute he was one of the most dangerous boxers in the world at one point, probably one of the most dangerous individuals in the world for pound punching and you know what he could do in his particular sport. Evander Holyfield was another very, very dangerous man who He's now missing part of his, I think, was his left ear? Was it his left ear or was it his right ear? I think it was his left ear, if I'm not mistaken. But no, you know, you know, you know, jokes aside and humour aside about who bit who and who headbutted who in that match, in that fight. Mike Tyson has stated it on the record. He thinks, yeah, people have got too used to getting away with saying stuff online. They're not used to someone else turning around and going, "I'm going to smack." Because remember when your parents used to say, "Be careful who you piss off because they're going to reshape your face. They'll turn around and give you a smack. Be careful who you gob off to. Someone's going to react." Yeah, people have got so used to getting away with whatever they want, and I don't want to get political here because that's a debate for the other channel. But people have got very very used to a very very, I wouldn't say weak legal justice system, but a more relaxed sentencing guidelines, and more rehabilitation in the community over punishment, that kind of thing. Would you forgive a man who bit part of your ear off? Well, Stephen Crichton lost part of his nose to, Carl Flanagan biting his nose last weekend and taking a chunk out of that. As I say, Amanda Holyfield wasn't the cleanest fighter either, and he was quite controversial. They both were in their throughout their careers. But that was what, 95, 97 that happened. That was nearly 30 years ago. That particular incident happened. But both boxers were highly controversial then. They're still highly controversial now. Amanda Holyfield hasn't really been making headlines for the last God knows how long, but Mike Tyson continues, obviously, with the YouTube boxing and all that. What's my thoughts on the Tyson Paul fight and these other? I think it devalues boxing massively. It's a sport that's got enough issues, especially with it not being on the Olympic program in 4 years' time in LA. Boxing's got enough problems, and same with MMA. These are sports with a lot of problems that I don't think they're addressing very well. If I'm being honest, I'm not a fan of them. But then again, I've not been a fan of boxing long before these YouTube bouts were taking place. I fell out of love with boxing quite some time ago, if I'm being honest. Again, I respect what what boxers do. I respect those boxers who are dedicated to their sports and train hard, and I do appreciate. And I know some boxers, so I do appreciate and respect boxers. I do, and the dedication and the sacrifices they have to make the top level and be successful. I completely respect that, but I do feel that the sport has got a lot of problems, and there are a lot of issues facing boxing. And I think these YouTube boxing matches and these YouTubers who done these boxing bouts, I think it's devaluing it. I think but everyone's got their view on it. Everyone's got their view on that kind of aspect to the sport, but there's a lot more deep-seated issues. A lot of deep-seated issues with professional boxing, and they're not going away, and I don't think they're being resolved by is it 4 different governing bodies we have for professional boxing, and then we have amateur international boxing. That's a mess. Got the Boxing Board of Control, where boxing, there's no one overall governing body. It's a mess. There's sleaze and corruption and doping allegations and a lot of things going on. Uzbekistan were the most successful in the 2024 Olympics in boxing. I'm not surprised with that. I'm not surprised with Uzbekistan winning a lot of medals in the ring. Martial combat is part of their culture historically, even before the Russian Empire owned Uzbekistan. there's been a lot of emphasis and a lot of respect given to those in society, like wrestling and boxing, those martial sports, going back to ancient times. So there's always a lot of respect given to those people, and it's a big part of their culture historically. So I'm not surprised Uzbekistan has got that record. And then part of the Soviet Union as well, when they were part of the Soviet Union. Again, a lot of government investment in sport for political means on the global stage with the Olympics. There's a lot of investment there in sporting institutions and sporting structures. So I'm not surprised the Uzbeks have done well there. So yeah, those kind of sports where it's based on martial arts kind of sports, they always do well. Not surprised. Cuba, yeah, again, when you have very state-controlled funding for sport, you will find the individualistic sports get a lot of funding. Also, when you've got countries that also have conscription military service, you will find that a lot of their athletes come from the army, the navy, or the air force as well. Again, Cuba, they're either good at baseball or they're good at boxing. And again, historically so, the Latin American countries have always produced good boxers and always produced good baseball players. It's part of their culture. And the same with judo and wrestling and taekwondo. The martial arts, some of these countries, it's ingrained in their culture historically. And great emphasis in society, put upon those kind of attributes. And it's a cultural thing. Worst Olympics ever, most controversial? Well, I've done the video on the 76 Olympics for how badly organised it was and the cost aspect and the cost overruns. Then we've got 1980 and 1984 for the boycotts by the US of the 1980 Olympics and the 84 Olympics by the Soviet Union, which were quite famous, which I actually studied at school. I had to study them as part of my history GCSE, was the Olympic boycotts of 80 and 84 during the Cold War, where soft power was used. But talking about controversial, it's difficult. The 88 Seoul Olympics is now known to have been having the most doping. They've retested all the samples taken, and 70% of the athletes plus would have failed today's tests. The 88 Olympic 100-meter final, out of all the athletes that took part in that final, only one was clean. He finished last. Let that sink in. So the three major Olympics in the summer in the Summer Olympic cycle are quite controversial. When it comes to Winter Olympics, Sochi's up there. Nagano and Salt Lake City, there's allegations about corruption involving the IOC. I think it was the 94 Winter Olympics with the Kerrigan smash of the knee. I think the Winter Olympics have been less controversial than the Summer Games. Although, yeah, the IOC, some question marks over Nagano in 98 and in 2002. The ice skating judges were a bit of dodginess going on there. And I believe it was Lillehammer in 94 with Nancy Kerrigan, the break her leg, kind of good luck, break her leg and being attacked. Yeah, that one. Winter Olympics tend to be less controversial than Summer Olympics. Tend to be. But there's always controversy at every single Olympic Games. Always. Without fail. I actually prefer the Winter Olympics over the Summer Olympics. I always have. I don't know why. Even though London 2012, I really enjoyed London 2012. Where I used to live was on the was less than 500 meters from the torch relay going past my house. So I saw the torch relay actually in person. And And my partner at the time, her mother worked as a volunteer at the Olympics, and the Olympic road race cycling went past my then girlfriend's workplace. So I was actively, actively saw a lot of the Olympics firsthand without actually having to go into the Olympic Stadium. I felt that Olympics was quite special, but I prefer the Winter Olympics. I've always enjoyed the Winter Olympics more. I prefer winter sports more. It's just a personal thing. But I'm trying to think of the most controversial Olympics since 1990, because the Winter Olympics used to be on every 2 years. I can't remember where the Winter Olympics were in 1990, if I'm being honest. I really can't. Was there a Winter Olympics in 19? No, there wasn't, because they used to be on the same cycle as the Summer Olympics. So you'd have the Winter Olympics in the winter and the Summer Olympics in the summer in the same year. And then they decided, no, we're going to split the Olympics up. So Albertville was 92, and then the same year as Barcelona. And then we had Lillehammer in 94, and then it became a 4-year cycle after that. Top 3 sports I watched the Olympics were table tennis, volleyball, and athletics. I watched half an hour, 40 minutes of the rowing. I was going to watch some more, but I watched a little bit of the rowing, and I thought the coverage, the way over here at least in the UK, the coverage was done was really crap. You had to pay for Discovery Plus, and I wasn't willing to do that. And the BBC, I've lost a lot of them. They've still got shared rights. They don't have every single event. The way they covered it wasn't great. And for me, if you're going to make the coverage difficult to follow, I watched a bit of the diving and swimming as well. But I basically watched the Olympics for about a couple of hours, and that was me done. Didn't really register. Wasn't really much like Tokyo and Beijing with the last couple of games, with the Winter Olympics in Beijing and Tokyo. I just don't have that same connection and vibe that I did when I was a bit younger, in my teens and 20s. I just don't enjoy it as much. And Olympic viewing was a thing in my family. That's something that used to be almost religious viewing in my family. Was the Winter Olympics and the Summer Olympics was a thing. It was it was a, I wouldn't say tradition, but it was more of a family activity. And on my bit of the family, where we talk about my mum, my dad, me, and my sister, when we were younger, before my parents divorced, and my half brother comes along with my stepdad when my half brother was born. I vividly remember it was definitely a family thing. Winter Olympics would come on, we would watch everything, because we were more of a Winter Olympic style family when it came to the Olympics, but Summer Olympics as well. It was everyone watching together and enjoying together for the 2 weeks the Summer Games is on, and the 2 weeks the Winter Games is on. As time went on, that became less and less of a thing. But I would say it was about the Athens Olympics where it started to become less and less of a thing. And as a family, we would watch the events less together. Yeah. But now, obviously, I live by myself. And the last Olympics I watched any real amount of was 2018 Winter Olympics is the last Olympics I really watched a lot of. And I had the last 6 years, the last 3 Olympic Games for me doesn't have the same kind of vibe and connection that previous Olympics have. And I would go back to around 2012. I obviously massively enjoyed those Olympic Games and watched a lot of them. But since the channel's been going, the only Olympics I've covered or watched in any depth was 2018. And I know a lot of people who didn't watch a single thing, and I know a lot of people who watched as much as they could. But as I say, not really a big vibe in regards to the Olympic Games, which is a shame. I used to enjoy the Olympics quite a bit, but there's always controversy in regards to the Olympic Games. Always controversy. There's always, that controversial incident or incidents, and yeah, and I'm not surprised some people decided I'm not watching any of it. And it's this time of year where a lot of people had their sports fatigue, because you'll have sports fans who are fans of one particular sports team or particular sport, and the summer in the Northern Hemisphere is the off season for rugby union and football. And the majority of people in this country are football fans or rugby union fans, in general. And they're like, it's the off season. There's a couple of internationals here. There's an international tournament, but for the most part, I can tune out until the start of the new season. We'll see what players we've signed, and we'll see what the next club season brings. And so I find in summer months that view counts are a little bit down, and people get fatigue. People get like a fatigue of the amount of sport on the TV, for example. People get fatigued with, they start to get tired in regards to the. It is a thing. I think sports fatigue is a thing. For example, I watch a lot of the NRL. I love my NRL, and the Origin period comes along at the same time that the Euros or World Cup are on generally, and next summer it'll be the women's Euros that will be on, and it's that period where I go, ugh, I love my state of origin, I love my rugby league. At the same time, I also like my international football, and they clash, and I basically be watching about 18 hours to 20 hours of sport a day. And I was like, I've got. If this channel was self-sufficient and was the income earner, I would watch as much of as possible, and I would just have to work around the football and the rugby league down in Australia. But yeah, it was nice to have a little break from the NRL, focus on the Euros, and as the Euros wore on, I didn't watch as many games this time around. I decided, no, I'm not going to watch all the knockout games. I'm not going to watch every game. I'm going to go see some friends. I'm going to have a little break. And I was actually feeling a lot more refreshed. But at the same time, I've actually missed some really big storylines in the NRL. I've missed a lot of players getting suspended and injured, and some teams losing form, some teams gaining form. And I'm like, wow, I've missed a fair bit of the league this season. And so I'm starting to watch games again. It's the business end of the season, and the off season's coming up. October, we've got some internationals at the end of the season in October and November, and then we've got a few months of nothing between end of November and end of February. It's the off season, so there's like 3 months off season, and then back into it again. The Rugby Union World Cup. I missed 2 games out of that, 2-3 games out of the Rugby Union World Cup, and I was done by the end of it. I was exhausted by the end of the Rugby Union World Cup that we had last year. I was shattered, and it did have an impact. I was working full time, going to work. The weather wasn't particularly great by the end of the tournament. The beginning of the tournament, it was really warm. I mean, in France, we had some 30-degree days, and they had to have water breaks. By the end of the tournament, I was shattered. I mean, I tried my best to cover as many games as I did. I think I missed a couple of games out of the Rugby Union World Cup last year. That was draining. Did I enjoy watching it? Yes. Well, did I enjoy? I've still got all my notebooks, and I'm more than happy to go through my notebooks and all that. But that was exhausting. That was absolutely exhausting, that tournament. When you're going to work, come in from work and watch straight into it, and finish work straight into a game, do a match review. It was a long days. It was actually exhausting. And yeah, that was exhausting. But it was fun but exhausting. And the Football World Cup in a couple of years' time is going to be. That's going to be. I thought 2014 Brazil was, with some late finishes and some late games and going on until the early hours. Yeah, I thought that was long. No, 2 years' time. That's going to be interesting in 2 years' time. And yeah, I think it could be quite an exhausting one. I think I agree. I think 48 teams is too much. I think 32 was just perfect. I think, yeah, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with the World Cup. We look at how the Copa America went. It didn't go great. There was issues with the playing surface, ticketless fans, organisation, quality of play. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens in 2 years' time. But I think it's going to be one of them where that's going to be a lot of games. I'm not going to be able to watch as many games as I would like. I'm going to have to cherry pick games that I watch and review in that one. But 2 years is then. This is now. There's a lot can happen between now and then in regards to the channel and the channel's direction the channel takes and how that all plays out. I'm hoping the channel is self-sufficient by that point and we're earning more money off this than my day job, so I can quit my day job. That would be nice. That's the goal. We are close to monetization. As I say, 2 years down the track, it could be. It's going to be interesting to see where the channel's at, and that's a discussion for another day. But right now, looking at it with how the Euros just went, with an expanded Euros, which is smaller than the World Cup, even covering the World Cup a year and a half ago, I didn't watch every game. I didn't do a match review of every game. I had some technical issues with my laptop, I seem to remember, in one of them. And I do think it was the Rugby World Cup. My laptop decided again to go bleh. So I had issues with the Football World Cup and I had issues with the Rugby World Cup. The first game of the Rugby World Cup, my laptop decided to go completely. The old laptop, which is down there, which is why we have the new one, which we've had for a few months now. But yeah, the old laptop decided to have a major blue screen of death, Windows blue screen of death. We got it up and running, but it was dying by the end. But just what we got the Chromebook now, which is far more reliable. More matches, more teams, more player welfare in jeopardy. So rugby Cup is 24 teams, 6 groups of 4. Still going to be 6 weeks. Yeah, I think the discussion around restructuring it is there. Do they lengthen it a little bit to fit the games in? But again, player welfare has been a big discussion over the last couple of World Cups. They've changed some rules in regards to the contact area, like head contact, concussion protocols, tackle technique. Rugby league as well, to a certain extent, is doing the same thing. I still don't like the TMO review system in regards to red or yellow. I think we need to give that back to the on-field referee to decide and his assistants to go, yeah, you're being sent for 10 or you're being sent for a longer stint off the field. Do I agree with expansion of tournaments? I think the World Cup is going to be an expansion too far when we obviously hit 48 teams in regards to football. In regards to rugby union, we saw what happened with rugby league with the expansion of the World Cup. They're contracting for the next one. They've gone, yeah, we may have taken this a step too far. We're now going to reel it back in a little bit, which I think was the right thing to do. How they've gone about it, they could definitely fix things there. Rugby union, it's an interesting one. I think the Rugby League World Cup, when it came to fixturing, got it right. I think every team was given the same amount of turnaround. Rugby union's still yet to get that scheduling right with match day turnaround. You could argue the Rugby League World Cup is a smaller event, and yes, it is. But the Rugby Union World Cup is basically trying to compete with football for TV viewership and growth. And we can debate the pros and cons of that. World Rugby, as I say, still hasn't got the fixturing balance right when it comes to match day turnaround. That's a regular criticism that comes up, especially from the smaller nations, going, we haven't got the same logistical support, financial clout, player depth that the bigger nations have. They seem to get favourable draws and favourable match day turnaround. The Rugby League World Cup we saw a couple of years ago, which seemed to have a much better scheduling. It was a week between games. So, yeah. No, it's going from 16 to 10 or something, or 12 to 10. They're making it smaller, basically. They're reducing the tournament in size. So you've got 8 teams already qualified. There's 2 more places up for qualification. There's a qualification tournament format. And yeah, they're reducing it in size. The Women's World Cup will take place alongside them, and then the Women's World Cup will then become separate from the men's and be a stand-alone tournament, just like rugby union and football and cricket, which I think will work better for the women's game, having their own stand-alone tournament, getting all the attention for themselves in that regard, rather than being overshadowed by the men. But the scheduling aspect of it, rugby league gets a lot better than rugby union. There's always a minimum of 5-day turnaround. You will not have a shorter turnaround than that. Yes, people argue, but the state of origin players do sometimes a 3-day turnaround, fully backing up. There are debates whether to stop players doing that. And say once you've been called up to origin camp, that's it. You are in origin camp until state of origin is concluded for those 3 origin games. Again, that player welfare, load management issue that we've discussed before. But yeah, World Rugby still hasn't got the balancing of schedule in the tournament right at all. Serbia, France, Wales, and Ukraine are playing for a place. So are Wales the best out of those? No, France is the best out of those by a long way. France is the best of the Europeans, and I think Jamaica, Greece, someone else are playing for the other spot. Cook Islands. I think Cook Islands. I think Malta have a team, which is mostly Australians, but Malta have a team. Greece and Jamaica, I think, are the other nations. Italy, maybe. I think they split it into 2 groups of 4 or something, and the top 2 out of either of them basically end up qualifying. France will be the next other team to qualify for the World Cup, and then it's just trying to figure out who the 10th team is. Which will most likely, in my opinion, be Italy. Would probably be the other team. Or maybe Ireland. Because it's one of them. But for me, France are the best out of the rest that aren't currently already guaranteed a spot in the next Rugby League World Cup. France for me would be the best, and then after that, it's a scramble for the other team. That makes it. But But there's been massive growth in Ukraine and Serbia over many, many years. Wales and Scotland, the game is not doing well and hasn't been doing well for a while. I'm surprised as well that a lot of players who play in the English rugby league system. The rugby in Wales, both codes has got problems. There's been some great Welsh international players for rugby league. Some great players have represented Wales, but the game, and I'm talking about just rugby in general, union and league in Wales has got problems, and a lot of it's to do with money, and a lot of it's to do with investment. Is there a mainstream sport in the world that you don't like? Mainstream sport that I just physically despise. Oh God. I think don't like is when you say it like that, I think I always respected the athletes that compete, be it amateurs, semi-pros, or professionals. There are sports that I'm not a fan of, but that doesn't mean I won't watch them at least once and give them the benefit of the doubt and go, oh, I'll watch this. I've got no interest in basketball at all, although I will watch a basketball match. So that defeats it. I'm not a massive fan of basketball. Not a massive fan of but in saying that, I will still watch a basketball match or still watch an NBA game, even though I've got no interest in a team, no interest in who wins or loses and who lifts the title at the end of the playoffs, who wins the draft. I've got no interest in any of that. I will still watch a basketball game if I was given the opportunity. But I'm not a massive fan, but I'll still casually watch a game here or there. Same with baseball. I will still, if I can, watch the occasional game. But no, honestly, there's no sport I actually physically hate. But there's some sports that I wouldn't say dislike, but I don't enjoy. Like I said, I like I like a lot of team sports. There's various forms of motorsport that I like. And I'll give every sport its due. I'll give every sport an opportunity, and there you go. But no, everyone's got their different sports that they enjoy, and then they discover that new sport that they maybe didn't enjoy as much or didn't watch before and have got into it, which is totally acceptable. And absolutely, I mean, there are, as I say, some sports that people have heard of, haven't watched before, then they get into that certain sport. And there's other sports that they've watched for a long time that they sort of become jaded by and frustrated with and fall out of love with. And, that's the thing. Are we done with new sports? While new sports being invented in the future? No, I think there's always the room for another sport to come along and evolve and become a professional thing or an amateur thing or a pastime. There's always room for a new sport to come about. No, lacrosse is an ancient sport that was played by the Native Americans long before Europeans came along. Lacrosse has been around for thousands of years. In a professional sense, it's a new thing, but in the olden days, no, croquet's been around for long. Will there be any sport invented in the future? Well, look at all the various sci-fi programs and films, and Star Trek. There were various games and sports that they sort of invented for the program that obviously were based upon real sports we have here. Harry Potter invented Quidditch, for example. You think of that. It's part of the storyline of the books and the films. They came up with this wizards, sport. You have a variety of in film and TV and sci-fi and things like that. They obviously invent the sport to work with the storyline of the TV series or the film. So pod racing in Star Wars, you've got Quidditch in Harry Potter, you've got the various Klingon sports in Star Trek. So drone racing that is a thing, by the way. People do that. Drone racing is a thing. It's not just been invented; it's been around for a while now. But no, there is no doubt that new sports will come about at some point down the line in the future. And other sports will continue to evolve. Some sports may completely become a thing of history, and people go, "We just don't. This is not a fun pastime anymore." But like jousting. Now, obviously, with the modern day, when you visit a castle or a chateau in France, they will have the people reenacting the jousting. But competitive jousting, the last time it was done competitively for prize money was in the 16th century, was the last official tilt, as they used to call it, in the tilt yard. Jousting was a big thing for about 300 years, and then it stopped being an actual pastime where you would try and knock your opponent off a horse at high speed, simulating combat. Some of the medieval games like the melee, which was basically what you would now know as the Armoured Fighting League, has resurrected what the medieval tournament, as it was known, the jousting, the melee, the archery. You now have the Armoured Fighting League that does the melee version, which is swords, warhammers, maces, axes, beating the crap out of each other. Jousting has now been resurrected as well to a certain aspect by reenactors, and there are some people who do it professionally. Archery has always been a sport, still at the Olympics. People still do archery professionally, but they're not fashionable anymore, if that makes sense. Though the Armoured Fighting League is starting to become fashionable. People have gone, let's put on plates of steel armor and beat the crap out of each other with weapons. And literally beat the crap out of each other. So there are certain things that, because people have read about them the last 20 years with the internet and TV, people have decided to resurrect old medieval sports. Although archery never went away. Esports has got relatively popular the last few years. Chariot racing. Well, that's basically what pod racing is in the Star Wars universe. They basically went chariot racing. We'll do the Ben-Hur scene with the pod race. Ben-Hur, people must remember Ben-Hur, the video game on PlayStation, and the film with Charlton Heston. That was the impetus behind the pod racing sequence in Episode 1 of Star Wars, was Ben-Hur and Roman chariot racing. And I have been to the Circus Maximus, by the way. There's only one part of the actual complex still actually standing above ground, and that's one turning tower. Bring back chariot racing. That's what motorsport is these days. That is what motorsport is these days. Motorsport is what chariot racing was 2,000 years ago. Is motorsport that we see today, which we've had for about 120 years. Yeah. And they tried to ban the Isle of Man TT. They haven't. Oh no, you might get hurt. That's the point. You might get hurt. It's the fear factor. It's the adrenaline rush. It's the risk of hopscotch. God. Oh, we're now just talking about random kids games now. Yeah, I've got friends who actually are professional paintballers, who've got their own teams and actually play in competitive leagues. Paintballing is fun. You can make some money out of it. There are some nutters who do paintballing for cash. Does Mario Kart count as a sport? Esports, yes. Esport. I've got to do a video on esports and how much the industry's worth, and how successful some people actually are. I've got to do a video on esports. And that is video worthy. Actually, do the video. What is a sport and what is a pastime? Well, okay, a pastime is played by enthusiasts with no audience, where games, as they're known, where a couple of mates get together and they play a game. It could be a card game. It could be a board game. It could be a game out in the garden. A sport is done for an audience, whereas a pastime is done by enthusiasts. And this is what I've always... No, billiards is a sport because people will watch it, and you have got professional billiard players who get paid to play. Now, billiards can also be classed as a pastime because you're doing it as a hobby with a friend. That's all you need is 2 players. But a sport is done for professional compensation and all for an audience. So yes, darts, carom board, snooker, billiards, chess. They're all board games or card games, because carom board is fun. I've actually played carom board. My family have had a couple of them, and it's like an Indian version of chess, so to speak, or checkers, but with moving bits. Instead of moving the piece, you've got to flip the piece. It's sort of like, it's where snooker comes from. Ironically, snooker is derived from this game. And it's a great game. It's fun, and that is classed as a pastime and as a sport, because you can entertain others by playing it. Let that sink in. And there are many who do not see snooker or darts as sports, but guess what? You've got professionals who do it professionally as their income, as a living. So now, then there's different categories of sport, like amateur, semi-pro, and professional. But guess what? There's always, to be a sport, you've got to have people paying to attend. Whereas a pastime is just done as friends. Getting along. Most games, pub games, aren't classed as sport because they're board games, card games like cribbage, any card game. Any board game can be played in a pub. So you've got the pub games, as they were known, and then you've got sports. Is cheerleading a sport? No, but people do class it as that. Right, I'm going to have to... I've got an itchy nose. My hay fever has been terrible. I haven't taken my hay fever tablets for a few days because I'm trying to ration them so I can get some more. Right. Let's have a look at sport and the definition. What is your definition? What is considered a sport? What is sports and games? Here we go. Right. The definition, ladies and gentlemen. We've had to go on Wikipedia for this. Right. And it's taking forever to load because I've got multiple devices going. Right. Sport is here we go. Sport is a form of physical activity or game, often competitive and organized. Sports maintain or improve physical ability and skills. They also provide enjoyment to participants and, in some cases, entertainment to spectators. Many sports exist with different participant numbers. Some are done by a single person, others being done by hundreds. Most sports take place either in teams or competing as individuals. Some sports allow a tie or a draw in which there is no single winner. Others provide tie-breaking methods to ensure one winner. A number of contests may be arranged in a tournament format, producing a champion. Many sports leagues make an annual champion by arranging games in a regular season, followed by playoffs. Sport is generally recognised as a system of activities based in physical athleticism or physical dexterity, with major competitions admitting only sports meeting this definition. Some organisations, such as the Council of Europe, preclude activities without any physical element from classification as sports. There are a number of competitive but non-physical activities that claim recognition as mind sports. Fuck me. The International Olympic Committee, who oversee the Olympic Games, recognises both chess and bridge as sports. Yeah. Right. Sports Accord, the International Sports Federation Association, recognises 5 non-physical sports: chess, bridge, drafts, go, and shangxi. Which I don't know what that is, but it's Chinese. However, they limit the number of mind games which can be permitted as or admitted as sports. Sport is usually governed by a set of rules or customs, which serve to ensure fair competition. Winning can be determined by physical events such as scoring goals or crossing a line first. It can also be determined by judges who are scoring elements of the sporting performance, including objective or subjective measures such as technical performance or artistic impression. Records of performance are often kept, and for popular sports, this information may be widely announced or reported in the news. Sport is also a major source of entertainment for non-participants, with spectator sport drawing large crowds to sports venues and reaching wider audiences through broadcasting. Sport betting is in some cases severely regulated, and in others integral to the sport. According to A.T. Kearney, a consultancy, the global sporting industry is worth up to $620 billion in 2013. So that is 11 years ago. I think it's a lot more higher. I think it's close to $1 trillion now. The world's most successful and practiced sport is running. Association football is the most popular spectator sport. So there we go. Meaning and usage. The word sport comes from the Old French des sport, meaning leisure, with the oldest definition in English from around 1300 being anything humans find amusing or entertaining. That's the definition, apparently. That's apparently the definition. Other meanings include gambling, an event staged for the purpose of gambling, hunting and games, and diversions, including ones that require exercise. Roger defines the noun sport as an activity engaged in for relaxation and amusement, with synonyms including diversion and recreation. The singular term sport is used in most English dialects to describe the overall concept. With sports used to describe multiple activities. Definition. The precise definition of what differentiates a sport from other leisure activities varies between sources. The closest to an international agreement on definition is provided by the Global Association of International Sports Federations, the GAISF, which is the association of all the largest international sports federations, including football, athletics, cycling, tennis, and equestrian sports, and more, in brackets, and is therefore the de facto representative of international sport. The GAISF, GAISF, as I'm going to say, uses the following criteria, determining that a sport should have an element of competition, be in no way harmful to any living creature. That's where horse racing and dog racing, people are going to go, that's not sport. Not rely on equipment provided by a singular supplier, excluding games such as arena football. Not rely on any luck element specifically designed into the sport. They also recognise that sport can be primarily physical, such as rugby or athletics, primarily mind, chess or go, predominantly motorised, F1 or powerboating. Powerboating, I've got to do a video on powerboating. Primarily coordination, such as snooker and other cue sports. The snooker is a sport because it's defined by an international sport governing body. There you go. Or primarily animal supported, such as equestrian sport. So yes, this definition says snooker is a sport. There you go, and that is by the Global Association of International Sports Federations have stated snooker is a sport. The inclusion of mind sports within sports definitions has not been universally accepted, including to legal challenges from governing bodies in regards to being denied funding available to sports. While the GAISF recognises a small number of mind sports, it is not open to admitting any further sports. So There's been an increase in the application of the term sport to a wider set of non-physical challenges, such as video games called esports. So they're applying to get esports classed as sport, especially due to the large scale of participation and organised competition. But these are not widely recognised by mainstream sports organisations. According to the Council of Europe, the European Sports Charter, Article 2.I, sport means all forms of physical activity through casual or organised participation aimed at expressing or improving physical fitness and mental well-being, forming social relationships, or obtaining results in competition at all levels. So there we go. Snooker is a sport. Right, amateur and professional. There's that. There we go. So snooker is classed as a sport by the global international sporting body. So there we go. There can be no argument there. Snooker is a sport. Doesn't mention darts though. Yeah, mind games though. Not necessarily, but snooker and darts are physical activity. Snooker is classed as a sport. Darts, you could argue it's a pub game that's earned people a lot of money. There is the gambling element. I think when people say baseball is America's pastime, they mean it as the oldest and maybe uniquely American sport. Yeah, potentially, yes. But at one point, it was the biggest sport in the US and Canada. Was baseball? It was the most popular sport. It made the most money. It had the biggest crowds. And that's not the case anymore. You would argue that darts has got more viewership than some of the other sports. Yeah, you could argue that. It's the way they've marketed themselves. The way that darts has been marketed over the last, I'm going to say 20 or 25 years, more eyeballs on the product, more visible, and there's more tournaments now that are worth a lot more money to the participants. And then you've got Luke Littler, for example, this new young kid, teenager, winning competitions and becoming a household name. He's 17, 18 years old now, something like that. He's very, very young lads, and he's doing very, very well. And you've got to compare him to other, what would other lads his age be doing? Went to watch Ipswich today, held our own in the first half, but Liverpool had too much quality for us to stop in the second half. It's the opening day of the season. You didn't lose badly. I would say that. It's not a. I don't think did any of the promoted teams win? I don't think they did. I don't think any promoted team won today. But no, it's the first game of the season. I wouldn't worry too much. If it becomes after the first month going into the international break, you're still struggling to get that first win or that first point, then there'll be concern. Transfer window is still open. You only signed 2 players yesterday. But you never know. But Man City, crikey, Man City this could be their last season as a Premier League club. We don't know what's going to happen with these 115 charges. We know that the hearing has been brought forward, and that starts next month, I believe. So we will see what happens with Manchester City and the outcome of their ongoing battle that they've got. 7 of our first 11 used to be regular starters in League One. But I think that's a good thing that Ipswich have done, is they've kept the squad together that's had back-to-back promotions and built a culture and built a team unity there, and then added pieces to it, and then bit of squad turnover, but they've added pieces to it's essentially a winning team. They've not made massive wholesale changes like Nottingham Forest did when they came up. They basically stuck with the team that's got them back-to-back promotions. And I think that's a good philosophy to have. And we'll see how Ipswich do this season, and we'll see, what happens, going forward with them. I really do. Saying it is a good thing shows how good a manager can improve players in a good system. Yep. I think the golf has gone between the Premiership and the Championship, sadly. No, I just think Burnley and Sheffield United were absolutely dreadful last season. I don't think the golf quality is as big as you think it is. I do think, however, there is a financial imbalance, and I do think there is issues with with football in general, I don't think the gulf is as big as you think it is. I just think it's two teams out of the three relegated had dreadful seasons, and the team that finished 18th, ironically, finished third in the championship, but finished higher than the two teams that finished above them the season before, and were significantly better than the two teams that finished above them the season before. So I don't think the Golden class, and they weren't a million miles off the teams above them. So I don't think the golf is massive. I think there is. Well, look, if that happens in back-to-back seasons, I don't think that all three promoted teams have been relegated in back-to-back seasons. Don't think that's ever happened before. It might have done, but I can't remember off the top of my head of all three teams that got promoted in back-to-back seasons getting relegated in back-to-back seasons. I can't remember that happening. It probably has, but I can't remember it happening. And I would have to have a look at the history books and really look at the history books to see if that actually did happen. But off the top of my head, I can't think of all three promoted teams going down the same season and then the following season in back-to-back seasons. I can't remember that happening. But again, it may have done, and I would have to do a lot of research. But as I say, can't think off the top of my head that happening. But I could be wrong there. But last season, I think the last time that they went, all three that went up, they got relegated was like 20 years ago. Yeah, so it shows how rare it is for all three promoted teams to get relegated the same season, and for that to happen in back-to-back seasons, I can't see that happening. I think Southampton will definitely go down. Again, it's a wait and see approach. I mean, we're one game into the new season. We're already talking about relegation favourites. I mean, Everton have got off-field problems. We know Leicester, I think, are facing a points deduction. Man City have got 115 charges. They've already been found guilty once this season of rule breaches, and they got fined very, very quickly. And their hearing's been brought forward. So I think the pressure is on the Premier League and the FA to punish them. So look, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, as I say. In my opinion, it's I don't think all three promoted clubs get relegated this season, but I do think there's going to be some managerial casualties this season. Ryan Lowe, I mean, I'm surprised he lasted one game into the season, but I can see some managerial casualties this season. And I think a couple of big clubs could suddenly be sacking managers. I can see some managerial turnover at the higher ends of the Premier League this season, and that's going to be interesting how that plays out. I think the lack of job security in the modern game is. I think the average tenure of a manager now is about 18 months. I think it's dropped to about 18 months. It used to be about 3.5 years. It has significantly dropped. Managerial turnaround's always been a thing. But I know in some professional leagues and some sports, the actual tenure of a manager or a coach, head coach or a head manager, has dropped significantly from what it was. Managerial turnover or coaching turnover is becoming more and more ridiculous. The NHL, I think the average tenure of a coach now in the NHL is less than 3 years. The majority of coaches have been in place for less than 3 years in the NHL. So 32 team league, and I think 2/3 of the league, their head coaches have been in place for less than 3 years or 3 seasons. The NRL, however, the coaching shelf life of a coach seems to be a bit longer, but I think that's starting to drop. There's been a couple of sackings this season. I can see some more coaches not fulfilling their contracts, let's just say that, and being moved on. There's a handful of clubs where the coaches have been there a while and have had contract extensions on more than one occasion. So Melbourne, the Roosters, the Melbourne Storm, the Roosters, Canberra, the Raiders. I'm trying to think. They've got coaches who have been there for over a decade. Each of those clubs, the coach has been there for at least a decade. Ricky Stewart's been there, I think, 9 years now, Ricky Stewart. He's just signed a contract extension. Craig Bellamy at Melbourne signed another contract extension. Trent Robinson at the Roosters, he's been there a long time. Yeah, I think they're the three longest tenured coaches in the league. They've won a lot of grand finals and been to a lot of grand finals between them. Some of the most successful coaches in the league. I'm trying to think, but the others, none of them have been there for more than 4 or 5 years. The manager of Harrogate's been there longer than Pep Guardiola. Well, that tells you all you need to know. And Harrogate have slowly been, improving as the years have gone by. There's a reason why stability brings success. But Jurgen Klopp's obviously moved on. 2009. I mean, that is Wenger levels at this point. I mean, Wenger and Fergie levels of stability there. You don't get that in the modern game. It's very rare that a manager is at a club longer than 5 years. Klopp doing 8 seasons. Pep doing as long as he has. I think Eddie Howe was a long tenured manager when he was at Bournemouth. To get more than 5 years is rare these days. Very rare. Like Diego Simeone at Atletico Madrid, rare. Whereas back in the day, a manager could be there for 5-10 years easy. And a manager might only have 2 or 3 appointments in his entire career. Now you might have a manager who has 2 or 3 appointments in a decade, maybe even less, maybe 6 in a decade. So managerial turnaround is a massive thing, and is well discussed. And is it good for sport? Is it bad for sport? That lack of job security, I think, is having an impact. I do think the managerial turnaround is affecting some leagues' quality and the quality of international teams as well, and player development. It has to. And that's another thing where we're talking about spending and club spending and controlling their expenditure. Paying managers termination of their contract and paying them out is costing clubs a lot of money. And there's compensation packages, and managers are getting paid out for years after they've left clubs. Something else I haven't discussed. Mauricio Pochettino is now the US men's national team new head coach. So it's going to be interesting how performances go under Pochettino going into the next World Cup. He's signed, I think, through the next World Cup, and we'll see how Pochettino does with the US men's national team. So there's that. Forgot to mention that earlier. Guy Roux was the manager of Auxerre from 61 to 2005. Yeah, he was there a long, long time. He won 1 league title in that time. I think he won like a couple of French. I think he won a couple of French cups and 1 league title as manager of Auxerre, and a couple of league cups. He was there a very long time. Won a handful of trophies. I'm being honest. But he's the reason why Jabril Cisse, for example, and became a superstar. He's the reason why Christophe Dugarry was a good player. He managed to find some really good players as manager. Some really good players. And they had a good system, and the ownership and the board and stuck with him, and there was that stability. But it's like Dario Gradi at Crewe. Was there a very, very long time. A world record is actually a guy called Fred Everest, managed West Brom from 1902 to 1948. But there you go. There you go. But this is back in the day. I mean, Auxerre. Okay, it's going into the modern period with Guy Roux, but he was a great. I mean, Auxerre's had some great players play for that club, but to only win 3 major trophies in 44 years, I mean, that is some patience that is some patience. But one league title in there, a couple of French Cups, I think, in there. Nothing else now. I've got to do a video on. I've got to do a video on Auxerre. But they did win the league once. Yes, I've definitely got to do a video on Auxerre. Very interesting club in France. Very interesting club. And they won the league in 1996. Auxerre won the league 96. Auxerre is a very interesting club, though. Very interesting club. But obviously Jabril Cissé came through their system. Christophe Dugarry, Giveronche. There was a couple of players that have come through. Auxerre, we've had great careers. And it's definitely, I've got to do some more football club history videos. But as the season's just started, probably we'll do them maybe mid-season. Some club history videos. I didn't do as many as I wanted to this summer. But yeah, football club history series. Got to look at the French league. Got to look at the Austrian league. I think slowly going around all the various leagues in Europe, and there's still some non-league clubs in England to look at. There's still some more clubs in Scotland to look at, but it's going to be interesting. Going to be interesting doing some more football club histories. But I'm nearly done all the football club histories that I want to do for this year. But next year we're going to look at more leagues across Europe, and Auxerre is definitely a team that I want to do a video on. Very, 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 very interesting. Gibraltar League has got one pitch, one league. I think they've got, is it 8 teams, 10 teams or something? But they've got literally one pitch, one stadium, one league, but they get it done. Fair play to them for maximising the use of their facilities, which is one stadium for the entire territory. Same with, very similar with Liechtenstein. They've got one professional club and a handful of semi-pro clubs, and they've got one major stadium. Bruno's Magpies, yes, the pub team that has now reached immortality status by getting to that next stage of European competition. There's always that's the feel-good stories you do want from professional sport or semi-professional sport, is that you do want those feel-good stories that come about. You want them, that they make headlines. We get less and less of them as time goes on, with the growing commercialisation and the growing globalisation of sport. But I do like those feel-good stories. Some of them are quite fun. If I'm being honest, some of them are hilarious. Good fun at some of them. But yeah. But yeah, so have I covered all the European leagues in regards to the club histories? I haven't done all of them yet. I've covered clubs in a lot of leagues. Done a lot of German clubs. I've done a lot of clubs in Switzerland, a lot of clubs in Italy. Done. So we're talking about European leagues. I've done a few clubs in Greece, clubs in Norway, Sweden, Denmark. But there's always room for I do need to do definitely some more videos on a lot of leagues. I've done some Dutch clubs. I want to do some clubs in Belgium. I want to do some of the Belgian league. I want to do some more in Portugal. I need to do some more. I definitely need to cover France and Austria. There's some more clubs in Greece that I want to cover. There's clubs all around Europe. There's some leagues all around Europe. I haven't covered them all yet, no. Liechtenstein is the only one that does not have a league. I think it does, but the biggest club in Liechtenstein plays in the Swiss league, which is FC Vaduz. But there is a Liechtenstein organised competition, I do believe, because there's a Liechtenstein Cup that clubs participate in. But no, it's a good question. I'll have to look into that. But yeah, no, I've done a lot of videos on clubs and leagues around Europe, but I need to do some more club histories on a variety of clubs. I think I might do Belgium in depth next, potentially. But I've done a few French clubs. There's always room for some more. Portugal is a crazy league. You have massive clubs and teams with hardly any fans. Portugal's mad. I've done a few Portuguese club videos. They are mad. But look at the players that have come out of Portugal. It's like Man United playing Harrogate in the league. Yeah, because outside of Porto and Lisbon, the towns and cities are really small, and just don't have the population to sustain to fill a stadium. That's the thing. Greece is interesting because you've got two big population centres in Athens and Thessalonica, or Thessaloniki, and that's where the big clubs are. And there are some big clubs in Thessalonica now. Olympiacos, AEK, Panathinaikos, and PAC always top four. No, because you've got Aris and you've got POAK Thessaloniki, I think. The teams from Thessalonica or Salonika, depending on things, from that part of Greece are starting to become powerhouses. Aris are starting to gain momentum. But I think I've covered the big four, but there's always, I think I've got to do the couple other clubs. It's going to be interesting when I look at some of the other clubs in Greece. I will do the Austrian league. That'll be fun to look at. Belgium will be fun to look at. There are some interesting clubs in Belgium to look at when it comes to success and history. Poland's another one that I want to do a lot of videos on. There's some interesting clubs in Poland. Maritimo, Nacional, Santa Clara. The islands help Portugal with Madeira or the Azores. Yep, Maritimo, Nacional, Santa Clara. Yeah, I can look into that. I think Santa Clara in the Azores is the most westerly located European team. I think a team in Iceland might be a little bit more. Some of the teams in Iceland might be potentially more westerly located, potentially. But we'll have to have a little look-see into that. And also, you've got, but we'll have to have a look because technically they're not part of the Europe. They're not part of Europe, but they are. And then you got obviously the Canary Islands as well. I think the most southerly European. There's teams in the Canary Islands. So, but that's an interesting one. In Spain, Tenerife, Las Palmas. Yeah, I think that's the most southerly European club team that plays in the European League. But again, it's worth looking into, and that'd be kind of fun. That would be kind of fun. I think the most northerly team is I think it is Tromsø. No, Tromsø is the most northerly professional football club. But how do they organise travel for fans? Air travel in continental Europe is a lot cheaper than it is here. Airfares are a lot cheaper than it is here in the UK. A lot cheaper. But it's difficult. But airfares are cheaper. But yeah, I think Tromsø is the most northerly, and I think it's either Tenerife or I've done a video on Tromso recently, so I know that for a fact. I researched it, but like I say, I wonder how many fans say Benfica take to Madeira or are allowed. I think you would have to be a club member, and they are allowed away fans to go there. They do allow away fans, but they're heavily sectioned and they won't travel in large numbers. I would have thought. There is obviously that tension between Madeira and the Azores and mainland Portugal that goes back to the dictatorship days of Salazar. So there is a political tension there as well. And at the same time, I was watching a thing about ultras or hooligans or the firm or whatever. There's different slang names around the world, like in South America and Europe, for the fan disorder and fans and the hooligan element. There's a lot of very, very strict legislation that's been brought in. And in regards to entering stadiums, IDs, fingerprints, facial recognition, they're starting to bring in some very draconian legislation that makes the legislation that Thatcher brought in the 80s in regards to football hooligans here in the UK look like child's play. They're getting very, very strict on the ultras subculture. Or the casuals, as we would call them here, the casual ultra subculture that has existed for the last 30 or so years. They're getting very, very strict on fans and who's in attendance, match day tickets, trying to restrict who goes in, and a whole variety of legislation across Europe and various countries. And it's not necessarily having a positive impact. Let's just say that. Morten Gamst Pedersen is from somewhere like above Tromso. He's Sami origin. Morten Gamst Pedersen. I think he's from far northern Norway. I'd have to have a look into his origins of Morten Gamst Pedersen. No, there's still some countries where there's political legacy of going back. I mean, like Lazio and Atalanta fans, for example. Yeah, that's Lazio very right wing leaning, Atalanta very left wing leaning. They don't get along. So in certain countries, yes, there are. There is a political and social element to certain rivalries where it's not just two clubs in the same city having a rivalry, or two clubs in different neighborhoods in the same city. This is two clubs in different regions of a country that do not get along because of the political and social leanings of club fan groups and club presidents and their hierarchy and stuff like that. Morten Gamst Pedersen back in the day was a fantastic, I think underrated player is a good way to describe Morten Gamst Pedersen. Underrated player. But outside his time at Blackburn, didn't really have a great career. Not going to lie, he wasn't fantastic before or after he played for Blackburn, ironically. He was just very, very good in the Premier League for a period of time. Very, very skillful player. But yeah, he was one of them. He was a cult hero. But otherwise, a very unremarkable career outside of his stint at Blackburn. So there you go. Anyway, I'm going to call that a day. I've been going now for over 3.5 hours. It's getting late, but here's something you could research. Which island has been more successful, Madeira or the Azores? The Azores is an archipelago of islands, and Madeira is a single island. So there you go. I think more top-flight Portuguese players have come from Madeira than the Azores. Ronaldo's from Madeira. In fact, I've got a couple of friends from Madeira. I think Madeira's got a larger population and more professional players or professional athletes have come from Madeira than the Azores. The Azores is actually a chain of islands, but that's an interesting one. Anyway, I'll have a look and research that. But for me, for now, thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate the questions. I'm going to call that a day. I've been going for nearly 4 hours. And I'll have obviously some more content for you guys, hopefully very, very soon.